Welcome to the FilmGamer Podcast, Season 3, Episode 27, Number 34 overall. It is the finale of Season 3. Why? Because I mentally decided that I wanted to do the 27 OC Season 1 episodes, because this is original content, and also I like the OC show growing up. So here's how it is. I'm going to get to the box office report. I'm going to give you my Letterboxd report. I'm going to detail an insane but rather mundane telling of me going to see Furiosa. We'll get into some E3 news. I'll talk about any technical issues I might have, social media fights, that whole thing, and tell you if I have any. So let's get right to it. This weekend box office was dominated by Sony movies. Sony had the number one movie in Bad Boys Ride or Die, the fourth Bad Boys movie. A lot of people said, and Will Smith actually, funnily enough, rebutted, or rather admitted to it, that this one, Bad Boys 4, should have been called Bad Boys for Life. And he's like, yeah, we messed that up. But it's not like you haven't messed up a couple of times in your life. He said to a fan on TikTok, and that like they should have called the fourth one Bad Boys for Life, and it's called Bad Boys Ride or Die. To that I would say, well, after Bad Boys 2, which was a very expensive looking movie, this cost $130 million in 2003, so like $130 million 21 years ago is quite a significant amount of money. And they made number 3, and they weren't sure if it was going to be like a hit, if people were still going to care. And it ended up, of course, being the highest grossing movie of 2020 with over 400 million worldwide and 200 million domestically. And it was the highest grossing movie of 2020 because, of course, COVID happened. So no getting around that. So they weren't able to play that card really again. So I was unsure whether this one would hit as hard. Of course, it didn't open to the same 62 million that the first one did. Opened to 56 million. And the funny thing that happened on two fronts is this. Early tracking comes on board for Bad Boys Ride or Die. And it says expected to do 50 million range. And I go, well, 50 million is less than 62 million for a sequel that's bad. But before the supercharged era of sequels last decade, it was pretty common practice for a movie sequel to drop off 10%. So the rest of the analysts in the box office community see no problem with that. So 50 million seems fine. Well, what happens is Furiosa, Mad Max saga, opens and underperforms. And The Fall Guy a few weeks before that underperforms. And If, the Ryan Reynolds, John Krasinski directed movie, underperforms. And people start to go, uh-oh, like, is everything underperforming? Do people just not like movies anymore? Which, of course, is not true. People love movies. People watch more movies than ever. They just watch more at home. And if a movie looks like a streaming movie, which to me, Bad Boys Ride or Die sort of did. I think it looks very gimmicky. People seem to think that looks very cool. There's a video you can see on Twitter of, or, TikTok or wherever social media platforms are, of Will Smith wearing a camera rig that spins around while he's loading a gun and shooting a gun sequence. I find it like very gimmicky, takes you out of the movie, is something that Neville Dean and Taylor, the makers of Crank and Gamer and the second Ghost Rider movie, and as well one of them did Mom and Dad, I believe is married to Selma Blair, Mark Neville Dean, or I could be mixing up their names, but anyways, they were totally into the camera gimmickry, and I just find it's very YouTube fan film-esque. Really good stuff. The stuff that Spielberg does are invisible effects that you remain immersed, and I find just camera tricks like that take you out of it. On top of that, the CGI looks way worse. The lighting setups, the particular frame that they have shown out of this film is one of a holdup in a grocery store. If you look at the first Bad Boys, the lighting, the camera, it's very like in your face but subtle. It feels real and heightened at the same time. And of course, Bad Boys 2 is the most heightened cop movie of all time. It is so insane visually, that movie. I don't think I've even seen Bad Boys 2 all the way through once, but I've seen the clips of it so many times because it's so outrageous. If you've seen on YouTube, there's a shootout scene where Michael Bay's camera keeps spinning in a circle, but instead of like a gimmick that lasts a second, it like the whole set is constructed that way, and it cycles, and it's to maintain the tension, and the whole shootout goes that way, and you see where all the characters are within a given space. So the geography of it is very, very cool. Another cool scene that's in Bad Boys 2 is that it has an extraordinary highway car chase that makes you think, watching it now, wow, like action really peaked in the 2000s, the early 2000s, like right up until 2005, before people started heavily relying on CGI with things like King Kong and whatnot. That's kind of the beginning of the uncanny valley. This has the most extraordinary car chase in it. I've seen a bunch of times because it involves basically one character who's an undercover agent takes off in a truck, and then the bad guys take off in an 18-wheeler carrying cars on top of it, and then the bad boys are behind them, and it goes down the Miami Causeway. And basically, the bad guys start like throwing cars at the bad boys, and it looks extraordinary. The behind the scenes on it, Michael Bay designed a rig that could specifically crash directly into cars to get the footage that they wanted, and the CGI that they used would be the obvious stuff in the center of the frame would actually be practical, and then the stuff around the edges of the frame would be CGI. So something that you would think like a flying car would be, oh, that'd be that they're driving through, that would be CGI. It's not. It's practical, and the stuff around it is CGI. It is such a thrilling car chase that I put it on my TikTok just to show how car chases have evolved from Bullet in like 67, which people consider the best car chase of all time, which is frankly ridiculous because you look at Bad Boys 2, and if we're not counting in the story, because that car chase at the end of Bullet is cathartic. I've seen it, but I was like thoroughly unimpressed with it because like the first car chases that I saw were Tomorrow Never Dies, the parking garage. That's an awesome car chase. Or the Bourne Identity with the Mini Cooper through Paris. That's extraordinary. Or the Mini Coopers in the Italian Job. Those are cool. So it's like I saw all of those, and then I go back to Bullet, and people are like, this is the best car chase of all time? I don't think so. But you watch Bad Boys 2, just the clip of the car chase from Bad Boys 2, I think it's like pretty cool. Even though the movie itself isn't very good, it's just like a mess of scenes, and Bay kind of, cuts everything to death, but it looks extraordinary. Like, it's a $130 million movie from 2003 that cost $130 million, and it's amazing because it's like Will Smith at the height of his powers, Jerry Bruckheimer at the height of his powers, Michael Bay at the height of his powers, and the industry at the height of its powers. And they're all working in concert to deliver an R-rated action cop movie, which is why in Hot Fuzz, 4 years later, Nick Frost's character asked Simon Pegg, Bad Boys 2 or Point Break, which one do you want to watch? No, which one do you want to watch first? And because it's the ultimate, fun cop cliche movie that, is extraordinary visually. And when I see Bad Boys 3 and 4 here, I just don't think that they look that good. There's a setup of the holdup in the grocery store that in Bad Boys 1 looks great, and here looks like a YouTube video that I could have shot in my garage with, like, very obvious lighting cues that don't look that complicated to set up and look, frankly, very amateur. And then you look at the budget of this, and it cost $100 million, which, while still is $30 million cheaper than Bad Boys 2 was 20 years ago, which is extraordinary to think about. It doesn't look that good. But the weird thing is like the standard game of expectations that studios play. Because after the 50 million targets came out for what this movie was expected to gross at the box office, Bad Boys 4, and other movies in the weeks prior started underperforming, people started revising their estimates down, and Sony lowballed itself, which they do all the time, actually, because you think like, oh no, they don't think their own movie is going to do very well. Quite the opposite. What they do is they lowball themselves and then have it overperform. So they're like, oh, look, it actually beat expectations. We did way better than we thought. And what happened was it just came into the average expectations of the 50 million that was originally recorded weeks ago. But it looks good. But it also performed really well overseas, indicating that people didn't care too much about the slap, which I don't think was ever on the table. In the book I'm reading now, and unfortunately lost the page that I was on because my bookmark fell out of my book, William Goldman, the author, who's a two-time Academy Award-winning screenwriter for both Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and All the President's Men, talks about star power. And it's very applicable to Will Smith today, where he goes, we do all of these things, and, actors are always trying to stretch themselves. Rocky wanted to play a Depression era, low life, and be in a drama and be in something Oscar worthy, and audiences wouldn't have that. They wanted to see Rocky be Rocky. And he's like, and today they're giving Stallone $10 million after his last two movies bombed. Does it make sense? I think it's a bargain. And he's like, because people want to see what they want to see. And Will Smith is one of those. He did this around the time of Men in Black 3 a few years ago, where he tried a few Oscar movies like 7 Pounds and whatnot, and they didn't really take off at the box office. And he does this thing that actors should honestly do a little more often of like, I need to do the one for the audience so people know I still got it. And that's just like, do an action movie. Like, do an action movie, have you play you. You're not trying to act or be something different. People want to see Will Smith be Will Smith. And it's an action movie in a franchise, so as long as it's half decently done, in which case it is, people will go see it, and they did. And that's why Bad Boys is number one at the box office. Number two is the Garfield movie, which, oddly enough, last week was number one at the box office. That's also a Sony movie, so Sony has the number one and number two movies. The Garfield movie cost like $50 million or something even under that. It didn't cost that much. And the makers of Blade Runner 2049, Alcon Entertainment, actually made this movie. I just kind of find that funny. I mean, people make different movies all the time, but it's just always funny when it's like, and now for something completely different. But yeah, Garfield is profitable for them. Bad Boys will be profitable for Sony, and they have the number one and number two movies. And they're the only of the 5 major studios that seem to get that movies need to be less expensive now. And they've been doing this for like 2 years, but, because Warner Brothers and Universal are bigger movie companies, they have bigger films. Paramount is also like smaller like Sony, so their movies are less expensive, so they tend not to overspend, but the big studios are like, we need to still be the top dog, so we're going to swing for the fences. So, yeah. Number 3 is If, the Imaginary Friends movie that John Krasinski directed. It only dropped off 23% this week, which is pretty good. Garfield also had a nice hold, but we'll see how both these do next week because Inside Out 2 comes out. If is at 93 million total domestic, like about 160 million worldwide. So it cost 110 mil. It might end up, making its money back domestically because it's on track in the same way that Free Guy was, another Ryan Reynolds movie, and that one did 120 million. So it'll be I'm not sure if it'll even be a single, but it'll break even. And then also things like that being a kid's movie, like it's been a while since we've had a PG rated movie in the marketplace. So it's something for kids to watch. So it might end up being a decent sized hit. Now, this movie, which is a flop, is Warner Brothers' The Watchers, directed by Ishana Night Shyamalan. This is the movie that caused, and not out of any blame or anything, but M. Night Shyamalan had a deal at Universal Pictures with Blumhouse where they would do his movies, and he sort of had a mini comeback. That's where he did The Visit and then Split and then uh, you know, Glass and stuff, and it was kind of like a second wind for him. And he kind of had a good thing going. Like the Knock at the Cabin did okay, even though it wasn't spectacular. It did okay, and then Old was a decent sized hit, especially when it was in 2021. It was summer 2021. Cost 18 million, made like 96 million worldwide. So he had a good thing going, but he wanted his daughter to succeed, and they wouldn't fund his daughter's movie. So he's like, fine, I'll go to Warner Brothers and make my movie there. And they ended up funding his daughter's movie, The Watchers, which is this one with Dakota Fanning about um, a woman who ends up in a mysterious forest, Dakota Fanning, and she ends up in sort of like a complex where they can't see out, but everyone else or everything else can see in, and they have to kind of make their way out of that. It's somebody described it as like a Black Mirror esque episode, and it'll be something I'll watch. Like I'll watch it on streaming. It'll be on Crave, in 2 months or so. And then people will talk about it then. And so I'm sure Warner Brothers knows that like, this will play in theaters for, I mean, even if it's just 2 weeks, so I'll give it a 4 week run, because movies are contracted to run for 2 weeks, and then afterwards they're pretty much released from majority of the theaters that don't want them, aside from the few markets that like continue to play them or play them well, or they find an audience somewhere. Because a lot of the box office comes from, like, for Nolan films, it's from the coast. So most of his business of Christopher Nolan's movies are done in New York City or New York State and Los Angeles County or California. And that's where the bulk of the box office comes from. And then, there's other hotspots like Toronto and Montreal. And then every so often there are movies where the flyover states, the red states, the more rural areas kind of catch on to a movie. And that's where horror tends to perform pretty well. But this was just a choice for Shyamalan to do a movie, support his daughter's career, which is a good dad move, by the way, because he's just kind of like, what am I gonna do? Like, they're both studios are agreeing to fund my movie, and one of the studios is agreeing to fund my movie plus my daughter's movie. Well, if I want to be a good father, I'll support my daughter's career. And he ended up directing the second unit on her movie, The Watchers, which was done so that they could get the movie done quicker. Christopher Nolan decides to direct, the first unit himself. And what that ends up doing is kind of doubling or double and a halving the length of the shoot, because you're doing long instances of people just standing around, maybe not doing anything. And so if you can have an actor go to a place where they can film scenes, it ends up saving a lot of time and a lot of money, because you're not waiting around for something to happen. The last Bad Boys movie, which cost $90 million, I remember being so shocked, and like it gave me internal panic that like Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are waiting around, like nothing is happening on this film set. Everybody is being paid, and they're not shooting. Why? Because they're waiting. This lighting is too harsh, and their exterior during the day, so they're waiting for the sun to move in front of the cloud, or the sun to move out of the cloud, so that they can get their spinning hero shot or something like that. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, that's like so much money being lost not doing anything. And really good directors can find something to shoot during that point. Like I remember on Exodus: Gods and Kings, the shoreline. They're shooting at the beach, and it's like the scene where the parting of the Red Sea with Moses and whatnot. And Ridley Scott is like, "Oh, this is great. Let's get some B-roll footage of the waves coming crashing against the rocks and stuff." And that worked really well for that. Of course, the movie ended up losing a lot of money because it made the fatal mistake of like um, brown skinning a bunch of like white actors when what you're supposed to do is you pick an actor who's like a no name, who's representative of the culture, whose story you're telling. You have them be the main character, and then if you want to whitewash, you can whitewash everybody around like the Jungle Book did. But you keep the main important actor who's like a no name, you put them in the movie, and because they've never been in a movie, the audience will, of course, accept them in the role that they're playing. Or you can do the opposite, where you have an actor who's like super famous that's like guaranteed to be a draw, and there aren't that many, but like you throw a lot of money at them to do this thing that you want them to do because you know that they guarantee some kind of audience and raise awareness for the movie. And then you cast them with like the appropriate culture of actors around there. Those are the two ways to do it. And then uh, Exodus was just kind of, I wouldn't say racist, but there was an institutionalized racism at play where they're like, well, if, we have Egyptians and Jews, like for real, in this movie, then nobody's going to want to go see a story about Jewish people. And that's just like incorrect because people immediately saw like Christian Bale as the least like Egyptian looking person that there is. So they had them dressed up in eyeliner and tanning oil, and it looked ridiculous. So it didn't matter that they spent, over 130 million on it. It didn't look good. Um, so that movie bombed. But my point being, for The Watchers, which cost like 30 million, it's the second 30 million bomb of the year. The previous one being Abigail, which took place all in a house. So I guess the money went to the cast. Um, I mean, it's decently well cast, but it's not like a great movie. But The Watchers at least looked like a movie. So I'll be interested to see it. Joe Blow gave it a decent, 6 out of 10 review. So I'll be interested in seeing it. I'm glad M. Night Shyamalan was such a good dad and supported his um, daughter's career. She doesn't seem to have the magic, but the other way of looking at it is this, is that, and I would tell Ashana Night Shyamalan, if she's listening to this podcast, this, is that and she probably already knows this, is that M. Night Shyamalan's first film wasn't The Sixth Sense. It was his third film. He did two movies, Praying with Anger, which was done in India, and then Wide Awake. And both were dramas, and not many people saw either. So he considers like Sixth Sense to be his movie, and it was like such a breakthrough that many people think it is his first movie. So she just needs to get to her third movie. She's done a bit of TV, Servant that her dad did. She's done this. What she has to do now is pivot to like, okay, I'm going to do my own thing and do something like either like a high-end YouTube like fan movie that nobody can get made. Like the guy, I'm not sure if it was Dan Trachtenberg or who was it. Well, Dan Trachtenberg did a Portal movie short film. But somebody did an Uncharted movie with Nathan Fillion that was just like a short film. Um, with and that premiered on uh, the live action fan film, directed by Alan Unger. Yeah, and he did something recently. If I can look it up right now. Hey, he's Canadian. Yeah, good. Yeah, he did Bandit. That movie wasn't too bad. Yeah. I was referencing it the other day. That's a Canadian movie. It's on Paramount Plus, and it's about a Canadian bank robber who's a bandit, of course, and that's played by Josh Duhamel, who has never been better than he is in the movie Bandit. So go ahead and see that. It's a true crime story, just about a guy who like was in and out, robbed banks, and did it with a smile. You've seen that sort of story before, but um, yeah, it was interesting to watch. Worth a watch. Yeah, it has one of my favorite lines of the last few years. Written by Craig Wenman, who I spoke to, by the way, on Twitter. After I complimented him on this very line, where Josh Duhamel turns to the camera because he is the voiceover exposition, kind of the uh, unreliable narrator, and he says, "Don't judge me by my past. I don't live there anymore." So I love that line. So if if Shauna can pivot to doing like somehow a smaller film, maybe she can do my screenplay for Safe Spaces, because that would be great. The watchers can kind of fit that in, and I'd love a female voice for my screenplay. Um, she could do that, but like this could also end up holding well. It might end up catching on, like more females go and see it. We'll see how it performs next week because it's not going to do much crossover or have much competition going against Inside Out. So it's always funny when you get reviews for a movie, reviews might be terrible, but audiences might like it. Like famously, Uncharted, 40% on Rotten Tomato, 90% audience score. People they're less picky. They want different things. They just want pure thrills. Critics, they want the formula, they want the structure. So for critics, it's all about structure, and for fans, it's all about entertainment. That's at least the simplified version of how I see it. Number 5 is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Decent hold. Just eclipsed War for the Planet of the Apes domestically, but is trailing it worldwide by 300, or by about 34 million. Getting close to the majority of where it's open, so I'm unsure if it will reach the number of the previous movie worldwide. For those of you who don't remember from the last episodes, movie studios take about 40%, or I would say 60%. Yeah, 65% of, and it depends, but like 60 to 65% of the theater gross. And after about 2 weeks, the theaters mostly get it back, and they get most of the money. But the most half of the money amount of the movie is made in the first 2 weeks. So they make about 65%, or take 65% of like what a movie made. So for Bad Boys Ride or Die, made 56 million this weekend, you would say that they are keeping about 30 million of that goes back to Sony out of the 100 million cost that they did. And there are multiple partners on movies, and there's a whole, you can look at the Wikipedia page on Hollywood Accounting to see that like basically nobody has any idea how much money these movies actually make, and that ticket sales would be more of a valid counter rather than just the raw amount of money. Like, I want to know how many tickets a movie sold, but they won't show that because ticket sales, as we know from previous episodes, peaked in like 2003, where there were like 7 movies coming out every weekend. Now there's like 2. So, yeah. Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes not making as much as the last one, but it is a bit less expensive. And Disney is happy with, if there's a 10% drop off, that's fine. It'll do well when it comes to Disney Plus, and it's just its own hit there. Somebody asked Will Smith about like making hits, if he could provide the definition of a hit, unrelated to his slapping of Chris Rock, and he said, I would say the hit is the same as it always was. It's just harder to make one. He said. And that's why, it's good to have a franchise to come back to. Like, where would Will Smith be if he didn't have, like, another Bad Boys movie lined up already? Because this was already in pre-production, being planned, being made. And after the slap happened, it got delayed for, like, other reasons. I think, like, money or taxing didn't fell through, or they just, like, strategically delayed it. It was semi-unrelated / related to the movie, just so that they could toss a fish to the lions the week after the slap came out and be like, oh no, Will Smith's 2 movies have been delayed. Looks like he's canceled. Cancel culture doesn't exist. But yeah, uh, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes will come to Disney Plus, similar to how the Omen did, the first Omen did, which I saw this week. And it'll do well. And Disney will pay itself some sum of money for this movie, like, another $100 million to balance the books. Again, Hollywood accounting is shady. And it'll be a hit at the end of the day because it's part of a franchise that they can sell and resell and repackage and regroup and whatnot. Speaking of which, another franchise, Furiosa Mad Max Saga, which I saw this week on a Thursday. And I'm wondering if I'm going to get into it now. No, I won't. I want to finish the box office. I'm trying to be more focused here and more diligent about dividing chapters. So, Furiosa dropped 60%, like a hefty, hefty drop for this movie. It just didn't find its audience, or didn't have much of an audience to begin with. I mean, as we know, the first Mad Max cost about 150 million, made about 386 million, not a whole lot. For what its budget cost, like it made less than, double of what its budget was, but it won 6 Academy Awards. So Warner Brothers is like, okay, it's important to us as a legacy for our 100-year-old studio. Let's go forward with a sequel. We'll self-finance it completely. We'll own this. And you can see in the movie that, like, the digital effects that they did would have been very hard to do practically, as the first one was. The first one had a lot of car stunts in it that were done practically. This one has a lot of, like, digital photography and fakery in it. And it works for, like, how the tone of the movie looks. It's just, it doesn't look as good as Mad Max Fury Road. And furthermore, it's a Mad Max movie that doesn't star Mad Max and has a female protagonist. And somebody was talking on TikTok of, like, do female led action movies work for me? And it was a woman who was saying it, and she was kind of like, no. And I thought that was really interesting because for me as a guy, it's a very easy sort of bone to throw. I know other guys on the internet whine about, wokeism and all that. But it's a very easy bone to throw because for me, action is the same. Doesn't matter whether a male is in the lead or a female is in the lead because most action movies for their style of violence use gunplay or driving cars or something like that. And for that amount, physical strength matters less. And then the rest you can sort of mask with good choreography as long as, the female lead isn't like paper thin. Like Haywire stars Gina Carano, who, is like a wrestler or MMA fighter, former MMA fighter, now an actress. So it's like, I'll buy it that they're tough. And like Ronda Rousey, again, also in the Fast and Furious movies, same deal. It's like, I'll buy it. But if it's somebody who's like 5 foot, 110 pounds soaking like Anya Taylor-Joy, it's like less hard to believe. But again, the majority of the movie is driving cars, so I wasn't too bothered by it. And so it's an easy bone to throw as a guy. You're making a guy film. Action is universal, so why not, score some diversity points with making the lead a female? Why not? And I guess the answer is, going by, comparing favorably to Tomb Raider, is that it does matter. Just next time, I guess, the great experiment is over and just go back to having guys in movies, like guys in guy action movies. Like, let's not try so hard, you know. Um, would this have been more successful with if it was a Tom Hardy guy movie? I think so. But, it's a better story because it's Furiosa's story. Like, there's not much story to Mad Max, so if they have something that can frame all the action coherently, George Miller is an artist, he'll go with that. So next is number 7, The Fall Guy. Made 85 million, again, performing in line with Anyone But You. These movies, like Furiosa performing in line with Tomb Raider, another female-led action movie, that's fine. Like, they're performing in line with expectations. It's just people have the wrong expectations. The Strangers Chapter 1, terrible movie by all accounts, cost $8 million, made $32 million, in a violent nature. This is an independent film channel film, IFC Films distributing it. It cost like 2 million, 2.5 maybe, made 3. Now, it doesn't, like, when you cost 2.5 million and you've made 3.5 million, you're already like in the profit. Like, it's not the same as, like, Mad Max costing 150 million, making 396. Maybe that movie didn't even make any money for Warner Brothers because of all the publicity and advertising spend. But, like, when you only cost 2.5, it's basically like 2.5 or 3 is like the break even. They're not doubling their budget on publicity with that. So this movie is another hit for IFC. And its big gambit is that it's a slasher film from the perspective of the slasher. So that's cool. And then just going down the list, because I thought I'd mention it, Tarot opened at the beginning of May. It's now been out for a month. It's still playing in about 247 theaters, so like second-run theaters like the Screening Room or Imagine Cinemas in the mall. All those places are getting it at like, $5 ticket prices, which are so quaint now. Anyways, this movie, 18 million domestically, 45 million worldwide. It cost 6 million. This is one of the most profitable movies of the year, and it's a horribly reviewed horror film. You watch it, it's probably not that good, but it has a nice hook to it. It's like, ooh, tarot card reading, those have always been scary. What if it was scary? What if the monsters were real? What if the monsters came out of the cards and blah, 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 It's like when a group of friends recklessly violate the sacred rule of tarot readings, never use someone else's deck. They unknowingly unleash an unspeakable evil trapped within the cursed cards. This movie has a 19% Rotten Tomatoes score for critics. Doesn't matter. A 59% audience score. That's a D. Doesn't matter. Horror fans eat it up, and that's why more horror films should be made. But, I don't expect people to understand it much. So, yeah, that's the box office. Also, this movie came out by A24 called Tuesday, and it's about a mother and her teenage daughter must confront death when it arrives in the form of an astonishing talking bird. And it's opened in 2 theaters, made $25,000, so that's $12,000 per theater. Let's think 1 New York, 1 LA. That's a decent per theater average, I guess, to start. The reviews for it are excellent, which is kind of, it's like a wild swing of a movie. If you watch the trailer, it's like basically where the wild things are. So, maybe it just emotionally pulls the right heartstrings. I don't know. You don't see Julia Louis-Dreyfus in much, but yeah, 89% Rotten Tomatoes. Or wait, and 78% top critics. So, people like it enough. It'll perform well, on streaming, which is how everything seems geared to be these days. Even though it doesn't seem like streaming makes a lot of money, and I don't think it does. It's just that the tech companies behind these like Amazon and Netflix, they don't really need to make a lot of money because they have a bit more certainty in regards to operating within algorithms and whatnot, and they also provide, technology to other people to use their streaming services. So it's, an interesting thing. But yeah, that's the box office for this weekend. So I already mentioned The Omen last week. It's just weird how it's like lingered in my mind because I got my mom to start watching it, and she got like a few minutes in, and she's like, it wasn't omen-y enough, it wasn't for her, and I get that. Just because it's kind of a movie that, like, as a prequel is kind of fundamentally unnecessary. Prequels are like the least effective form of franchising to me. Like, sequels make sense because you can always like go bigger. One of the screenwriting things, and I've mentioned it on here before, is this taking place at the most important time in a character's life? And if so, why not? And a lot of times it's like because we've already told that story. In rare cases, is it ever that, well, actually, what's more exciting and more interesting is what happened before. I mean, you look at Star Wars, the prequels are less interesting stories than like the original, which has a pretty perfect screenplay. It's just that the crazy myths of like what Star Wars was in people's minds grew exponentially along with that technology able to tell that story. So the special effects, the imagined version of the special effects came along at the perfect time to make the prequels good. And they had two crappy movies in episode 1 and episode 2, and then I use crappy lightly because like the stories aren't good, but I love them as a kid. Well, I loved 1. 2, which again I've seen like a bunch of times and rewatched this week. I gave it a 2.5 star rating. I guess I should give it a heart, but yeah, uh, it's kind of funny. The soundtracks for um Star Wars Attack of the Clones, I would say I have listened to more than any other soundtrack because the Across the Stars theme. I remember studying and listening to that soundtrack on Spotify or on YouTube a bunch and again and again. And I never get tired of it. It really is elite. Like the speeder chase in that movie through Coruscant, where you have like 3 planes of action of like up, down, left, right, moving in 3D space. That's cool. I wish it was a bit, in a better movie, but because the plot is like, well, Anakin is falling in love with Padme, and then meanwhile Obi-Wan is tracking down a bounty hunter who he doesn't end up killing. Mace Windu ends up killing, and then Anakin falls in love with Padme, which happens in like a 15-minute stretch, and then the rest of the movie is like filler. It's kind of it's not great. But it's really rewatchable because there's, all of the individual scenes are dynamite of like, the bounty hunter fighting the Jedi Knight or, the Colosseum match and the giant lightsaber battle. That's cool. Or Yoda fighting Count Dooku. Or surprisingly, Count Dooku kicking the ass of the two heroes despite being an old man. That's kind of interesting to me. And the aforementioned speeder chase. So that coupled with like the best music of the best composer of all time's career. It's so funny that it's in like a middling movie like this, but it is. So yeah, I like Star Wars Attack of the Clones, and I was filming my nephew's reactions to episode 1 and 2 as they were happening. And then my other younger nephew was not cooperating. And as I mentioned from last week's episode, I was looking over the kids for the week, and it was like kind of the first time I've had close to that responsibility. So I ended up changing the younger one right as Yoda came out and fought. And he had the biggest reaction to Yoda fighting of like, whoa, Yoda's fighting, awesome. And I'm like, oh, gosh, that was the one thing I wanted to get because it's the most exciting, surprising thing that happens in the prequels. But we'll see. If he hasn't seen it by the end of June, I'm getting him at the end of June, hosting him at my place. So, we'll watch Star Wars Episode 3, and that way I'll totally, take responsibility for, scarring him with Anakin Skywalker burning, which for some reason I think he won't honestly be too bothered by, or I'll follow my mother's advice and like pause it right before it happens and be like, and then this happens. So, yeah, that's, because kids on the playground are like, oh, I got you, I cut your arm off. And it's exactly like that. And then there's an extended scene of him on fire because he's too close to lava, which in what world are kids going to be too close to lava? People always talk about being burned by lava. So we'll see. Again, I might just pause it and be like, and then this happens, and then skip ahead 5 minutes. So yeah. And then another movie which I rewatched was Margin Call. Excellent dialogue, almost needless to say because it's Academy Award nominated. But yeah, one of the things that stuck with me this time was when Kevin Spacey's character, and Kevin Spacey being good in this doesn't bother me because he's fundamentally like an evil person because he's like a stockbroker or investment bank manager and he's just like a lifer and everybody hates him anyways. So um, it's the perfect thankless role for him. It's like one of the few times where he plays a good guy. I find that Kevin Spacey being outed as a creep, which we all knew what he was all along, um, doesn't affect for most of the roles that he does because he's a creep in most of the roles that he plays. So I'm fine with that. Like, he's a creep in American Beauty, so he's great in American Beauty. He's a creep in Seven, so he's great in Seven. Here, he's an investment banker that's basically causing the 2008 financial crisis to unfold, to start. And he has a line with Jeremy Irons, who realizes, thanks to Simon Baker, who's a real shitheel in this movie, of like, guy, barely 40, out of his depth, doesn't know what he's doing, does the most basic thing. He's basically evil like Trump was in the 90s and still is, but like around that age of like guy who got there because of his family connections, doesn't really know what to do and isn't qualified for the situation, is a big scapegoat, and he's just kind of like, let's just sell it all. It has no value. These stocks have no value, but we're going to sell it anyways. And he gets that ball rolling. And Kevin Spacey, ironically, I guess, by the passage of time being the voice of reason, is saying to Jeremy Irons, who is the head of the company, like, you're panicking. And Jeremy Irons is like, do you understand, like, what's going on here? He's like, this is it. It's starting now. If we figured this out, someone else is going to figure this out. This is the starter's gun. You know, there are three ways to be successful in this business: be first, be smart, or cheat. And he's like, I'm not a fan of cheating. And I know many of us consider ourselves smart. I would not. I would much rather be first. And he's like, so we're starting it. And Kevin Spacey says to him, it is starting because you are starting it. And I think about that kind of thought all the time, because there have been times where if everybody just held their guns steady and didn't fire, how much better so many situations would be, of like, nobody panic, nobody move. Doing nothing is the hardest thing to do. And of course, you know, they set off the firing gun, and, you know, the 2008 crisis happens where people like move money and sell it to people who buy worthless stocks, and they lose everything. That is what's fascinating to me, because there are times where people operate on the assumption of like, well, everybody else is going to do this eventually, so I might as well do it now. And they don't take responsibility for like being the first one to do it because they think, well, anybody would anyway. And it's a very cynical attitude that I hate, because it's like, well, I wouldn't, and you're just doing it as an excuse for you. Take some responsibility. And I like those questions that Kevin Spacey raises. And, you know, so many great lines in it where Stanley Tucci talks about saving, you know, millions and millions of hours by building a hallway, to which Paul Bettany, who is less smarter than Stanley Tucci, nonetheless has the great line of like, don't think about it. Some people like taking the long way home. And there are just so many great lines in this movie. I've now seen this 3 times and enjoyed it every time. Margin Call. One of the best movies of this century, I would say. Okay, so, as you know, I started my Ottawa trip on Saturday, May 25th. And that was one day after Furiosa Mad Max Saga officially opened. And my only concern going on this trip was typical with my life. When am I going to be able to see the movie that I want to see? Now, I usually am relegated to going, and I don't mean relegating. I guess that's a bad word to use, but I usually choose to see a movie with my father and my uncle on Cheap Tuesday, so the following Tuesday. And sometimes in the past, I've set up the movie for them while I went with a friend. And I'm like, well, I'm going to Ottawa to visit my sister. Maybe I can go with her. And even though now she has a kid with her, and she wasn't like super excited. My uncle wasn't super excited. And then afterwards, I saw the movie. My dad wasn't super excited in seeing this movie. And as it turns out, most of North America wasn't super excited to see this movie. And yet, this is the movie that is, Mad Max Fury Road. Like, everybody was like, oh, go see this movie. It's awesome. And it looked awesome. And nobody wanted to see this. So somebody at Warner Brothers really needs to, like, think hard of, like, why did this not land, like, not even open remotely to the same amount that Mad Max did? Is it really just having a female protagonist and it looking shitty? Probably. So the funny thing about its identity is that this was kind of a movie that I should have seen on my own. And I ended up kind of trying to drag people to see it, and I ended up seeing it with my buddy Devin, who I'd done a podcast with in the past, one of the first. So that was good for me. Mentioned the plot details to my sister, and she was like, not really. And so I didn't go see it the first Tuesday, the 28th, because I was like too tired. And then I'm like, I guess I'll go see it next Tuesday because, I want to save some money. And then around the next Tuesday, when I had convinced my friend Devin to go see it with me, I'm like, when can we do this? Or am I just going to go see this on my own? Or am I going to wait to go see it with my dad? And he was like, well, I could do the following Thursday. So we did not go to see Mad Max until 2 full weeks until after it's open. And if you know, in the past, if you've ever had a bad theater experience like I did for Furiosa, or that I've had in the past on many movies, it is when you go see a movie past the opening week. Sometimes at least past the first 10 or 12 days, for sure. And this was day 14. If you go opening weekend, you're going with fans. If you go on the first Cheap Tuesday, you're going with casual moviegoers. But if you go beyond there, and it's not like a Friday or Saturday night, or even afternoon, if you go midweek on a not special day, you'll just be there with people who are going to kill some time. And that's who I saw Furiosa with. I did not go to see Furiosa with film fans. And worse, I went to see Furiosa with non-film fans in 2024 in a small theater in a city that I hadn't driven to the theater on my own before. And so it wasn't the best time, even though the movie was okay. So what happens is, it is the final Thursday. My father comes to pick me up on Friday. So this is the last time I can kind of go see a movie. I extend my stay in Ottawa a few days. And I'm like, I'll go with my buddy Devin on Thursday. So Thursday being the last day before I go, I then realize that, like, I should probably pick up the kids because I haven't picked up the kids, I've picked up the kids like 3 or 4 out of most of the days. It's like one of the things that I just did to make myself useful there. And I like doing it. My father liked doing it as well. It's easy, quick in and out to like be a part of your kid's life and just be like, what happened at school today? And they tell you the highlights. And like you forget them, but you get in a casual routine of like, get to see them every day. You have a thing to do. You're driving. You have somewhere to be. And you can listen. A lot of adults don't know this today. You can listen to whatever you want. You don't have to put on the Disney princess music that they love listening to, or Spider-Man or whatever, on your Spotify and customize playlists for them. They don't care about that. They listen to whatever you listen to because music is a universal language, my friend. In fact, if you've ever in the middle of the night heard like a hit song in your head, and you're like, ooh, I'm going to remember that. And then you don't. But it's like, oh man, I should have remembered that. It's a hit song. I did that 2 nights ago. And my phone was dead, and my other phone was dead, and my other phone was dead. I have like two dummy phones because I have one phone, a temporary phone, and then one that was given to me after my phone presumably broke, but then got fixed. So I had like none of my phones available, and then I'm like, well, I can't go all the way downstairs. I'm so freaking tired, because it's like 4:30, 6:30 in the morning. I'm still like in sleeping mode. This is like the day after I get back from Ottawa, and I'm like, but this is like the sixth or eighth or 10th time that I've had like what is in my mind like a hit song. So I know that like when I wake up in the morning, I'm not gonna remember it. I've tried to hum it out or whatever when I was staying at someone's apartment, and like tapped it out, wasn't enough. But I'm like here at home, and I'm like, okay, I need to record this somehow. That digital recorder that I bought that I've like never used, I spent like $60 on. I'll hum it and explain my thoughts into that. So I get up and I go downstairs and I record, or not record, but just, yeah, I record. I hum out a song called like Malibu Baby. That, like, to me in my head is like a Paul McCartney Beatles esque song about Paul, who's worried that his daughter Stella, who ended up becoming like a fashion designer and made handbags and stuff like that, very famous and successful at it. He's worried that she's going to grow up too posh and not be in touch, and learn all the wrong lessons from his rock and roll roots. So he, similar to M. Night Shyamalan, supports his daughter's dream and stuff. And then at the end of the song, her store burns down or whatever, and in this alternate universe, Paul McCartney is like wistful of like, oh, what a shame that the tragic end to my daughter's dreams starts here, and it's time to wake up now. But he's also happy that the tragedy of like what could have been, like similar when somebody finds great success and it ruins them, didn't happen. So it's a song weirdly about nepo babies and like nepotism. Um, at least that's what I tell myself. And then I have like the inspirations of like the, Frankie Valli and the old time crooners, and then kind of like a ghostly chorus. And I'm not a musical person at all. I can't write out musical notation, but neither could the Beatles apparently. And I'm kind of like, okay, let me like hum this out. So yeah, I'm working on I think because like with technology today, it's like I recorded this into my recorder. My recorder also has a USB stick on the bottom of it that can pop out, and then I pop that into my laptop, um, and then I was able to record it, and then now I'm able to cut and splice in what sounds like, ooh, it sounds like the beginning of this Frankie Valli song, or it sounds like the beginning of the Valerian City of a Thousand Planets movie trailer. It sounds like that, and like nobody knows what I'm talking about, but I do, so I can cut that together later. So like that's what I have in my head, because I know when I wake up I'm not gonna remember it. But in the morning, in this 4:30 to 6:30 in the morning, it is so clear in my head that this is like something. I got something here. And it's funny because I'm remembering it as if it's like a Beatles song. Like it's like, the movie Yesterday where he remembers all the Beatles songs no one else did. That's like me in my head. And it's funny because Paul McCartney famously, I believe it was about Yesterday, had this idea that like had this song in his head, and he could have sworn that it was someone else's, but it wasn't. And that's what I had there. So, look forward to my new number one hit single, Malibu Baby. Um, and just to give you a little bit of it's like, ooh, oh, oh, baby. That's all I'm giving you. That's all I'm giving you. Yeah, it's gonna be big. Maybe I gave too much. I don't know. But the other thing is that like when you release a song, you're releasing it to the world. So um, in my mind, this song might never be made. So why don't I release it to the world? So that's that's maybe what I'm working on, depending on feedback, depending on if I finish it. If I don't do it this week, it'll never be done. But how did I get from here to Furiosa? I I basically have no idea. But the fact is this: is that I was driving down Colonel By, like approximately that in on the Thursday in Ottawa, and the traffic picking the kids up, the traffic getting there was fine. It's 10 minutes down the road. The traffic getting back from there to my sister's house was an hour. I left at 4:30. My movie's at 6:30. And then I don't yeah, it's worse than that actually. I get there and it's like 5 and then I don't get home till 6. This is 10 minutes down the road. Okay? It's completely ridiculous. And I start, if you've ever made like a bad decision, um you kind of realize at a certain point that you're running out of time of like, oh, I got to get moving. And yeah, that is basically what it was like for me. Of what I realized, like, oh crap, like, am I going to be late for this movie that I've been like wanting to see all week? And yes, yes, I was. I was spectacularly late. And what was frustrating was this, is that I had put my phone, the one I'm using now, down. I'd put my phone down. Uh, and by the way, the drive that I was on was Highway 19, the Vanier Parkway. Um, so, like, just moving from the Vanier Parkway, like, past the highway, like, along the Rideau River, was just, like, impossible. That needs to be fixed. So, 6 o'clock, I get in, and I can't find my phone. And I lost my phone before I went. And my sister had said to me, like, you have to take a phone with you. So I'm like, okay, let me take the smartphone that doesn't have the SIM card in it. I can still make 911 calls. It's fine. I'm like, I promise nothing will happen to them. So I go and I pick them up, and I end up having to turn down a one-way street because they live at the end of a cul-de-sac. That's just like a street that's like not even 6 meters long, um, and I just make a quick right turn on a red when traffic's moving like at a foot to go in, and I drop them off, and I can't find my phone because I put my phone resting on a bar stool chair, and I put a Kleenex box, or somebody put a Kleenex box like in front of that phone. So I couldn't find where my phone was when really it was just like behind a Kleenex box the whole time. That was like right in front of me. So I am not able to say to my friend Devin, hey, I'm going to be late. What are we doing? Are we meeting at the movie theater? Are we doing this? So, and had I been more clear in my decision making, and I'll know for next time, I probably would have made it on time, but it's like 6:28 and I'm going from downtown Ottawa to Canada during rush hour, and the time is ticking away. And it's like, in good traffic, I would have made it there in 15 minutes. This was like a half hour. And it's like 6:25, 6:28, 6:30, and I get to my buddy Devin's house and I see no knock at the door. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So we went to the theater. Okay, so I need to go to the theater. How do I get to the theater? I know that it's vaguely down the road, but I have to look it up on my phone. But I don't have any data downloaded because I don't have my actual phone with me. And it's just kind of like I have to keep looking on the maps and flipping on my phone because I don't have those settings uh, fixed because it's not my main phone. Trying to navigate Ottawa. And I'm like, I make up in my head of like, okay, this is going to be a bad movie experience. Like, I'm going to miss part of this movie. And at the time, I was like, okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to meet up with Devin, and we're going to be like the same as last time when we went to see Barbarian. We went to see Barbarian, and he wasn't feeling it, so we don't end up going to see Barbarian. We go and having like a nice dinner, have a nice chat, and I'm like, okay, well, that's what we'll do this time. But like, he also has, he works during the day as a school teacher, so like, it's like, okay, well, we'll cancel the showtime and like have a nice dinner. Maybe doesn't really want to see the movie anyways. Um, and like I'll just go to the 10 o'clock show or something like that. Um, and well, what happens is I get there. I'm like, is he going to be waiting in the lobby? And he's like, it's not. And then I'm like, well, I'm not able to contact him. I'm pretty sure, like, if it were me, I would go in. But maybe he just, like, there's a chance he forgot about it. Because, there are times with my dad, I remember with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, he was out with my mom and they were doing a chore at Home Depot. And I had to mention to them, like, I'm like, oh, I don't want to be bothersome to him. But I called them and they're like, oh, like, I'd completely forgotten because it's like a Tuesday. It's not like the Friday the movie's coming out, so your mind isn't lined up with it. So I wondered, is that the case or whatever? And then I'm like, can I check your Wi-Fi? Because that way I can call them or something like that. And they were like, no, we don't give out Wi-Fi to customers. I'm like, yeah, okay. And then I wait a minute, and then I'm like, well, okay. What if I um, check the tickets and see if the tickets have been scanned? They say, yes, they have been. I'm like, oh, they both have? Like, did he go with his mom or something like that? And he's like, no, when one card gets scanned, they both get scanned. And I remember that I had given him the screen grab of our ticket, which I usually do because I like putting it on the cloud of like Facebook Messenger so that it can be looked at later on. And the annoying thing to me is that, like, I hate not having a piece of paper. I hate bringing my phone with me to the theater. I like having as little baggage on me as possible because it affects my legs, my knees, my movement, and stuff like that. But I tried setting up the printer at my sister's house earlier, the business printer, and like printers, famously the jackass piece of technology out of every piece of technology. They are the worst piece of technology. They never connect to anything. They constantly disconnect. Um, they don't really have much of an interface with them. They try and operate buttons without a screen, and they operate wirelessly as if they would never disconnect at all. Honestly, I would consider violence if I ever met the CEO of like Hewlett Packard or this was a brother printer, but same diff. So like I have to keep it on my phone. And keep in mind, I don't have my main phone, so I was lucky that basically I realized, like, okay, I have the screen grab of that. I can save that. There's the QR code. There we go. So that's what I used. Um, if if I hadn't have saved or sent those tickets to Facebook Messenger, I wouldn't have been able to get into my own movie, and I would have had to basically like uh, upset my sister and be like, I know it's the last day, but sorry, I can't take the kids. I have to figure this out. Or I would have went with them, and I would have been like a nervous wreck about missing my movie, and I would have like, my sister wouldn't have cared too much, but I would have been like silently stressed out, and it wouldn't have been good because I wouldn't have been driving. At least when you're driving, you're like in control of this. Like, okay, I can make this lane at this time. I can do this. And it's like when you make a mistake, the one thing that you can do is own your own decisions. Of like, I remember one time I was with my father and we wanted to go see Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and there was a guy with me that was um, I believe it was Haley Millen's dad and Haley Millen, and they were going to see a movie. And Haley Millen was like, "Will's a movie expert." I'm like, "Yes, I am," but I like wasn't as confident in my skills then as I was now. And he was like, "Oh, well, you're an expert. Well, there are these two big lines. Looks like these movies might get sold out before we get to them. Which line should I get into?" And then I pointed. I'm like, "You get in that line." And then I'm like, I'll get in this line. And I had him get in what I thought might have been the better line. But I didn't want to be wrong. So what happens is they get in, we don't. They get the tickets and they're like, you should have listened to yourself. And I'm like, yeah, I should have. But it's good to know that I was right. And I made someone else happy rather than letting someone else down. And we went and saw Final Destination 5, which was just like recited on my timeline as having like one of the best endings. So, you know. Final Destination seems to trend on Twitter every like 2 weeks. And then it trends on TikTok anytime a log truck tips over. So, I don't regret seeing that movie. That was kind of like a funny goofy, different movie for me to see, even though I would have preferred seeing Rise of the Planet of the Apes with my dad. But, anyways, that was a time when I realized I'm like, oh, I want to be the master of my own fate, the captain of my soul. When I make a decision for something, there are times in your life, and everybody's learned this lesson, where you like a buddy or somebody who you realize much more later is way less invested in the outcome than you are. And they make a suggestion, oh, you should do this. And then you think to yourself, oh, they know better than me. So you listen to them. And it goes like horribly wrong. And then afterwards, they're like, oh, well. And you're kind of like pissed of like, oh, well, like I was depending on you for this. Like, what the heck, man? Um, and you think to yourself, I should have trusted myself because if I was wrong, I would have been able to own it. When you take someone else's advice and they're wrong, they're gone. Like, it's not their problem. It's not their situation. You have to live with listening to them being wrong. And that kind of builds up resentment. So that's why, people say it's like, maybe you worry about being a control freak or something. It's your own life. So I would say being able to drive on my own and be like, I should have been there earlier, I'm late, but also I chose to pick up the kids. That's how that is. I got to spend time with them. I got to be late. My friend isn't going to be late, I know that. So it was only letting myself down. And I was like, if anyone's going to be let down, it's going to be me because I can take it. So I arrive at his house. He's not there. He's already gone to the theater. I'm like, crap. I need to look up the map. And then I can't connect to his Wi-Fi because it's his house. So I have to get like some version of Google Maps that's offline that maybe I downloaded that maybe is accessible to me. I don't know. And then like vaguely look around. Okay, if I sort of go down this, because I know it's left down the way of the house. And I like go there and I get there and I check and then I check the ticket and then I go in. And it looks like I missed like the first 5 to 10 minutes. My friend's like, you made it. I was starting to get worried. The annoying thing was I had messaged him on Messenger, but he hadn't responded to that because maybe he doesn't get data. He was going straight from work to that. So had I called him directly, I would have been able to explain to him. But man, in this day and age in smartphones, anytime you call somebody on their cell phone, less than 50% of the time, or 50% of the time maximum, do they pick up. Most of the time, and I do this on my phone, and it's just because my phone doesn't seem to buzz half the time when it rings, because it's, on silent. I miss calls, unless I'm staring at my screen. If I put my phone down, which I do often, it's face down, so I miss the call. So everybody who has smartphones misses calls 50% of the time. So we just constantly text. And when you text, you're not communicating with somebody. You're taking that 100% communication. And there's no visuals. Like, not everybody's doing a video call. So you cut that down to like 50%. And then you're not hearing them. So you cut it down to like 10%. So you're only using 10% of communication powers to text. And then I'm down to like 5 or 1% because I'm trying to message over data, and he's not answering. So I'm like, crap, that sucks. So I'm just gonna have to go there and wing it, and hope it all works out. So I get there and I ask him how much I miss. He's like, the first like 2 minutes, because it's like 6:45 when I get there, and by the way, it says 6:30. So it's like 15 minutes of previews maybe. But this is also like 2 weeks later, and so I don't know how much I miss. It's like 5 to 20 minutes, but it's like I've seen a movie before. I know what's going on. Furiosa is like in her gardening place, and then, similar to Rise of the Planet of the Apes, like Caesar, she gets taken from her place of paradise, and, the movie begins. And that's basically where I picked up, where it was like she was being kidnapped and her mother was chasing her down. And I'm sort of getting into the movie. And a couple of things happen while the movie is going on. I'm already trying to get reoriented because crap, I've missed it. This is no longer going to be the perfect experience, which is fine because it wasn't my most anticipated movie of the year. I mentioned like countless times on since it opened that up, like it looks cool, but it doesn't look as good as the first. So I'm kind of like, whatever, it's a write off. I'm a big boy. I've seen hundreds of films in theaters before. I can reorient myself. Like, my dad took me to see the Pokemon movie, 20 years ago, and we missed the first 20 minutes of that. And I think we missed the first 20 minutes of Men in Black at the drive-in. And, I've missed the first few minutes of movies before. And it's kind of exciting because you have to pay attention right away. So I'm kind of like getting into it and stuff. And then like somebody in front of me like looks on their phone and I'm just kind of like, okay. I remember when I saw Inside Out 1 in theaters and like it wasn't a good experience. Why? Because it was like a few weeks later, there were kids there, there were adults there. As I mentioned, it's like you're not seeing it with the fans at that point. You're just seeing it with people. So I'm letting it go. I'm kind of like, okay, that bothers me, but I'm not gonna get up and do this because it's like I was late. This is nowhere near a pristine exercise viewing for me. Like nothing's being spoiled further than I already spoiled for myself. So I let it go. And then, this is right next to the IMAX showing of it. So, occasionally you hear rumbles, but in less secured theaters, you hear like the ticking or the rattling of the lights or the vent or something. And that happened not every few minutes, but it was enough that I like noticed it. But it wasn't loud enough that it was distracting to everyone else. It was just distracting to somebody who pays attention to me. So I'm just kind of like, you know, the IMAX version is allowed to be loud, I guess. And it's one of the small theaters. Like, we're talking theater number 10 out of 10. There's like 20 theaters at that cinema. There's like 26 or something like that. But I was like, this is nowhere near a perfect experience. I'm going to let it go. Yeah, so I did. And then the lady checked her phone, like, a second time, and I'm like, they're reasonably far away. Like, again, I'll say something, maybe somebody else might have been checking their phone and stuff, and it doesn't take me out of the film because I'm not completely immersed in it. So I'm kind of like, this movie is good, but I wish the showing was better. What drives me more crazy is when the picture is wrong or the sound is wrong. That bothers me more than an individual, because in isolate you can tell the individual to be quiet or whatever. And I had done that. I've done that enough times where if this makes any sense, I don't have to prove to myself that I can do it. I can sort of just do it, and I wait for a nice time and make sure that they're being obnoxious. And granted, I have high standards, but I was kind of like, I'd paid $20 for this, like $10 per ticket. And like, the experience is being ruined. But again, the experience was already ruined by me being late, so let it go. And then my buddy Devin takes out his phone. And I'm like, fudge, this was not a good person to see this movie with. Like, I went with the wrong person. And annoyingly, I remember, I'm like, did he do this once before? And I just kind of blocked it out because he's like my only friend in Ottawa and stuff. And he's looking up, the actor, Anya Taylor-Joy, and I'm like, okay, Will, don't tell, he's your friend, you can't tell him to be like, turn off your phone or whatever, because it will like end the friendship or something like that. And so I'm just like, hey, what are you looking up? And he's like, oh, I'm trying to see what what I know her from, Anya Taylor-Joy. And I'm like, okay, well, you're a savant. You can help him out. If he knows, then he'll like turn off his phone and he won't need to look anymore. So I'm like, have you seen The Queen's Gambit? He's like, what? The chess TV show on Netflix, The Queen's Gambit. Have you seen that? No, I haven't seen that. I'm like, okay, well, maybe he's thinking more recently. Have you seen The Menu? He's like, what's that? I'm like, it's the restaurant movie, like the horror movie, The Menu. Like, that's topical. That's like somewhat political, rich snob. Maybe you've seen that. No, I haven't seen that. And I'm like, okay, maybe he's thinking like art house. Have you seen The Witch? That was like her breakout movie. Have you seen The Witch? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, what's the most recent movie she's in? Dune Part 2 is just a small cameo. Have you seen Dune Part 2? No, I haven't. And then I'm thinking, like, my guy, we took a film class together. We did a project where we recorded a podcast of a film review together. Do you even watch movies? And it's like, if you don't know or haven't seen or don't recall any of those movies I saw, then how the F do you know who this person is? And then I see on the browser that he has Split on there on the Google search engine. I'm like, it's Split. She's the main character in Split. He's like, oh. And then he's kind of still looking and he's going to IMDb. And then I'm just kind of like, okay. He's not going to, like, he's just, this is it. This is where we're at now. It was at that very moment where I realize movie theaters have totally lost the phone war. It is over. It is gone. It is not coming back. It is only going to get worse. People are going to be totally on their phones like they are at home. And me, I'm on my phone constantly. I'm on my phone when I watch movies at home all the time. It's my second screen. It's everybody's second screen. Okay? I get it. I'm not like some snob who's like, I'm watching a movie at someone's house and telling, oh, look, you gotta see this. So, like, you know, I get, sometimes when, I'll say it's just very frustrating when you're watching a movie with somebody and, they're like, oh, I want to see this movie. And then they're on their phone the whole time. And then they're like, not looking during key moments, like they're on their phone and they miss something and they're like, oh, what was that? Can you rewind it back? No, I can't rewind it back because we're watching this movie once, okay? I'm not watching this movie twice to explain it to you, or I'll just tell you the whole movie, which I could do about like almost any movie I've seen. So the thing here is that it's a critical point to me, and it's a very slow realization that I knew was coming. Basically, when I went to see The Fall Guy a few weeks ago, and there was that pre-roll video of Ryan Reynolds and David Leitch saying, like, oh, it's okay to be on your phone if you look in your jacket pocket and do it quietly. First of all, fuck you, David Leitch. And you know what? Fuck you, Ryan Gosling. Because that was very disrespectful to movie theater patrons. Ryan Gosling, you just did 2 movies, La La Land, and were edited into a promo of like no cell phones on during the movies. And somebody pointed, when are movie theaters going to get it that like it's not the ringer going off that bothers people, it's the screen, it's the light pollution. And yeah, it's like not an unreasonable request. And I had to actually go and ask myself internally at this point of like, is it me? Am I the guy who's like being unreasonable for asking people to turn off their phones in 2024 for a movie that I paid for? And like, I'm enjoying the movie. Like, there is nothing important that is happening in your life that you need to check your phone now if you're going to see a movie in the first place. If you, are going to the movies, what's going on in your life now is not of immediate concern. You go to your life you go to the movies to disconnect from your life for 2 hours. And that temple is being violated. And it's very irritating to me because movie theaters are expensive and I still like to go. And I'm not like some of the maniacs on Twitter who are like, AMC screen list 24/7. I'm going to see a movie every week. I go to see a movie once a month. If it's a movie I think looks good, I'll go see it. It's worth paying for. I'd say I'd see about like 12 movies a year. And this was one of them that I'm like, this looks good. I want to share this with somebody. It's important for me to go. And it just sucked. And then so I politely asked my friend to put his phone away, and he's like, "Yeah, okay," and he doesn't take it. And I'm not thankful for that because he shouldn't have taken his phone out in the first place. It's very disrespectful. But the people in front of me were more disrespectful because, oh my God, the ringer of the lady in front of me's phone went off during this movie. And this is happening in micro increments. Like they take out their phones, and uh, I see the screen, and I'm like, it's ruined, but I'm not gonna say anything. Take it out again. The lady's ringer goes off, and then it's loud, and she's like, oh my God. And it's like, if your ringer is going off in a movie theater, you're kind of a stupid person. Because why, like, I get setting your ringer to on, but it's like, there are like one, two, three, four. I don't know how many, but it feels like there's like at least two. I'm being dramatic, but there's two of like, turn off your phone. So if you don't listen and you don't turn off your phone, your ringer goes off, you're an idiot because you look like an idiot. And yeah, you're like not an important person. We're all going to see the movies. If you were important, you'd be in an emergency room or something, or trying a law case, or you'd be, on call. In which case, you would get up, and leave. But you wouldn't sit in your seat and be on your phone. It's it's just ruined, and it's like movie theaters are like the one place where I can like go and be somewhere and be completely comfortable. And it's just ruined. So I make up my mind at that point. I'm like, okay, the lady in front of me is stupid. I'm gonna have to say something, but I'm not gonna say something now because like the movie is already compromised. I'll say it later when there's lower stakes. And this is like 2/3 of the way through the movie. It's a 2.5 hour movie. And then at the movie, and I have it as part of at, at the screen. And this is during the end credits, in case you're wondering why I took out my phone. But I took a picture of like the lady and her husband in front of me who were on their phone. And they were on their phone a third time nearing the end. I mean, it's even one thing, if you want to put levels to it, to take out your phone in a movie theater, like just flat out. You don't have it in your jacket pocket or something. It's just right in front of you, full screen brightness. And I was going to say it, but it's like, well, I can't say it because the friend in front of me has said it. So, or has like taken the friend beside me has taken out his screen. So, yeah, it's a bummer. So, it's the end of the movie though, and they take out their phones during like the climax of the movie, and that's annoying to me. It's like, okay, you're just asking for it at this point. So the movie ends. Take a photo for posterity because it's like the end credits and stuff. And then they're on their phone. They get up, they walk down, and I'm like, am I going to tap them on the shoulder going down? No. I wait perfect time for them to go down, when you go around the corner towards the exit. They're going around the corner towards the exit, and I'm up above them. So I have the height advantage, I guess. And I say to the lady, excuse me, just to let you know, it's fine. The movie is over. It is done with. But it is rude for you to have been on your phone. And then she's like in panic mode. She's so scandalized and like, oh my God, somebody gave a shit that I was on my phone during the theater. Oh, what do I? Oh, like the look of horror on her face. Like she is embarrassed, which was very satisfying to me. Of like, good, she's scandalized. That's what I want. Like, I want people to know that like people still care. Like you can't. This isn't a zoo. This isn't a peanut gallery. This isn't like Midnight Madness even, although, there's a place for that. Not here. She, actually, you know what? No, because like at Midnight Madness, everybody actually does have their phones off and are super into the movie, and are like quoting lines of the movie at the screen. So that's actually like way more engaging. So it's actually the opposite of like Midnight Madness doesn't really even apply there. Yeah. So, anyways, she's all scandalized, and I say it doesn't matter. The movie's over. but I've found you being on your phone really distracting. And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry. I had the ringer on. I didn't know how to turn it off." And I'm like, "No, no, no. It's not the ringer. It's that you were on your phone. I saw you 3 times on your phone, just scanning, doing nothing. Like I was even looking. They weren't even looking up anything important. Not that they ever were, but you're curious at that point. It's like, what kind of person is this? Are they looking at sports scores? Are they looking at stocks? Are they just looking at the news? It's like the people looking up Wikipedia plot descriptions. By the way, you're in the movie theater. The people who write those Wikipedia plot descriptions have to watch the movie in the theater. In order to watch the movie in the theater, they have to pay attention because they have to update those plot descriptions pretty quickly. Um, so, um, it like within the first month, but they don't do it until usually the movie comes to video for spoilers. Um, so you're not going to find any answers online. Just watch the movie. It'll all make sense. If it doesn't make sense, it's a bad movie. But like the people are just so stupid that you have to share the movie theaters with now. And it's like I don't want to pay $25 for my own ticket just to have a decent movie theater experience. It's, as Quentin Tarantino says, and you can find it online, it is a working man's medium. It's not a concert experience. This is not the opera. This is just me going, forgetting about my problems for 2 hours, or 2.5 in this case. So she acts all scandalized and tries to write it off like, "Oh, I couldn't get my ringer. Um, it's a mistake. It happens to everyone." And I say, "No, no, no, it's not that. You were on your screen multiple times during the theater, and it's already ruined for me, but I want you to be considerate next time." Weird request, I know. And she immediately then, after denial doesn't work, she gets angry. And she's like, "Did you hear what I said? Um, I couldn't get the ringer to work." And it's like, you can't deny from me that you were on your phone. And this is precious to me. The husband clearly saw that this wasn't something that I was going to like back down on. But I am also, again, had a already ruined experience. So I'm like, not going to get angry about it. This isn't like Star Wars opening night. It's 2 weeks into a movie that, like, in a small theater. So I was like, the experience was already ruined for me. I had mentally let it go. So I wasn't attached, but I still cared because I still have that basic courtesy for other people. Um, and the worst part is that it was, there weren't too many people in the theater, so maybe it was just bothering me. But I believe that if they did it here, then they've done it for multiple movies and people haven't said anything. And I want her to think twice next time she turns on that movie. So the husband can tell that his wife's getting mad, A, and B, that like she's being told off by like a young guy who gives a crap. And he doesn't care anyway. He just wants to get home. He knows, and I know, that we are never going to encounter each other again. So he makes a joke of it, and he says, "Come on, honey, leave the liberal alone," which is funny. My pal Vu, who you've seen when we reviewed The Boys on my YouTube channel, we've done a few podcasts together in the past. He said, it's kind of ironic that, like, the one upholding traditional movie theater etiquette is, the conservative, is the liberal in this case. And it's a conservative position to be on your phone during the movie. Or, I think simply it was like, I complain a lot, so I must be a liberal. I'm not a liberal, by the way. I'm moderate, I guess. But it's not like, is this a political issue? I don't think so. It's just you're being an asshole in a movie theater and you're embarrassed and he knows his wife is wrong. So he's just like, let's end it here. And I approached it with the appropriate distance. And my friend, who knows me as not a confrontational person, I'm not a confrontational person. But I do have my principles. And this was one of them. And so, he's like, "I'm really surprised you said something." And I said, I had to say something for my own sake because it was going to bother me not saying something. Um, I can't, you can't let that stuff go when something bothers you and it really bothers you, at your core. I don't think I'm asking much, but apparently for many people it is asking a bunch because, um, you know, it's really hard not to be on your phone. I don't know. So, in summary, I was late. It was a small theater. Multiple people were on their phones, including the person I was with. And I told the person to be quiet and get called a liberal. Um, and as for the movie itself, it was 7.5 out of 10, or 3.5 out of 5. I know that doesn't completely line up, but the action sequences were good. It was well directed, but it didn't look as good as the last one. It was visually a lot of green screen, even though it was well deployed. I don't think maybe they could have done the same stuff that they could have done had they done it practically, or else maybe they would have, or George Miller might have. Um, or it's just the state of the industry as we were in. I will say it's a suitable follow up to Mad Max Fury Road, but like for waiting 9 years for this, it's like, yeah, it's sadly probably one of the best action movies you'll see all year because the strikes delayed a bunch of movies, which is why we barely have had anything this summer. Um, so there's that. But it was like just kind of okay, because all that stuff, all those distractions, like, yeah, they affect your showtime, but it doesn't affect the movie a whole lot. And I'll know for sure when it comes out on Crave in like 2 months. But yeah, 7.5 out of 10. I just didn't care too much about the two factions who are going to war because they're both bad guys. So you're not rooting for one over the other. And the main character doesn't have a super heavy presence in the story. Again, similar to Mad Max Fury Road, where Max is just kind of like a passenger. But yeah, it does open up the wasteland and the world of it to be further explored. But it's just not as vital as it could have been. I'm also not soft pedaling in any way, but like it didn't need to be an R-rated movie. Yeah, there's some detached limbs and stuff like that, but it's not something that like I find very far too many movies are R-rated. Bad Boys, the previous one, Will Smith says the N-word in it, which he seemed like he was uncomfortable saying, but it's like, you know, they're swearing is part of the culture in like the Bad Boys movies. Like, if you're making a Bad Boys movie, the boys should be bad or be able to be bad. So I kind of get it there. So, but the reason I bring that up is because it's the highest R-rated opening since Oppenheimer almost a year ago now. So it was significant that it opened so high. Like an R-rated movie opened to over 50 million. That's quite big. Um, and it's funny, Oppenheimer is another one where, like, yeah, it has a sex scene. They probably could have done that in a PG-13 way. It didn't really need to be R-rated either. Um, so I just kind of find that funny. R ratings to me seem more of like the filmmakers making a statement of anything else of like, oh, we're being serious or we're being like goofy or juvenile. And like most of the time, you can make a PG-13 movie. Like if you look at most of the movies Steven Spielberg has made, like he invented the PG-13 rating with Temple of Doom. And because Temple of Doom features somebody digging into somebody's heart is so violent, they're like, okay, we need a new rating for this, but our rating is too much. We need something to cut the distance, and that like led to a lot of problems with violence on screen in terms of conflict because it's like, oh, well, shooting somebody is fine, but you can't see them bleed. That doesn't, now we are dealing with like a very group of desensitized people who are just consumed to watch violence without consequences. The benefit of an R rating is that like when somebody gets shot in the movie, it's like realistic. You see like the blood squibs or something like that, and you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, like that person is dead. Like, they're not just a nameless husk. So, yeah, I find that to be interesting. Um, very few movies like utilize their rating properly, but Spielberg films like Schindler's List is an R-rated movie. Like, there is some like graphic nudity when the people are being exterminated. There's a lot of extermination in that movie. It's brutal. In Munich, a guy gets stabbed in the head. Um, that's brutal. Somebody literally paints a wall with a person's blood by shooting at them. So that movie is so bracing and brutal. But then, you go to War of the Worlds and Minority Report, they have some dicey things, like a guy gets his eyes extracted, or, people get plucked out of the water and, drained of their life form, that's dark, but it's PG-13 because it's like done in sort of a subtle way. Um, so yeah, and not many movies need to be R-rated. It's just people need to be more clever. And a lot of times when things are more clever, like people bring up, there's a movie called It Happened One Night, which I've been meaning to see. And they couldn't show character changing. Like back then, there was no R rating. This is like the 1930s, so they had to be clever. And one of them is just like, you don't see the character changing, you see them on like the other side of like a clothesline, and you see just the clothes go up, like flap over the side. And that's in a way sexier because it's more suggestive. And that's the thing about PG-13, is that it forces people, if you're smart in displaying violence, to be more creative in showing that violence, because you just have to suggest it and then the mind does the rest. So yeah, and you get one F word. So how many good F-bomb jokes are there in a movie? Usually one, if it's a good movie. That's why Furiosa, of course it could have been PG-13. Like, um yeah. And as a result, it made a bit less money because less people could see it. Now, I mean, the other thing is, with the advent of digital tickets, like, you know, anybody can buy any form of a ticket in advance and just scan their thing. People don't even look at really what movies they're going to see. I mean, is the part-time worker going to stop the kids and say, hey, you can't go to this movie because of whatever? Like, back in the day when people had physical tickets, yeah, but now no, because you can just buy it all ahead of time. But nonetheless, people don't all, if you're not supposed to go to a movie, there are people, like maybe I would have been, who are like, okay, we're not going to see that. But then again, I got to see Sin City when I was like 12, and Punisher when I was like 11. I think that was the first R-rated movie I saw in theaters. But like, it was, you know, it was awesome to me because it's like, there's no torturous violence. It's just like violence. And my generation is far too desensitized. So, Furiosa, yeah, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. It had good direction, good action. It wasn't vital story-wise, but I liked actually the chapter difference. It follows Furiosa's like most of her life up until Mad Max Fury Road. So you watch Furiosa and then Fury Road. I think it pairs together quite well. I imagine, and yeah, it's a decent time. I'd say go see it at the movies, but it's like evident that unless you're paying for some kind of premium experience like that, like it's not worth seeing. Maybe you could go to, I think if you went to the screening room, because in Kingston, it's very clear to me, in Kingston, even though the ticket prices are higher, by the way, like I checked the ticket prices for like when Furiosa was opening, and in Ottawa, it cost $14 because there's multiple movie theaters. In Kingston, it's $16 because there's two movie theaters. There's Cineplex and Landmark, and Cineplex here sucks. Um, but there's also the screening room, and people in Kingston really appreciate movies. It's one of our favorite pastimes. Um, you want to go see a good movie, you can go with old people. They pay attention. Less of them are on their phones. Although this lady who was on her phone this time, she wasn't a young person. She was a middle-aged lady. She was like I mean, I keep wanting to say 49 to be generous, but she had some city miles on her. Like she looked like they were in their 50s. Um, yeah. So um, I'm sure they went back out to their truck and talked about what an a-hole I was for telling them to turn off their phones during the movie. But whatever. Maybe I should write an AITH post on Reddit. Am I the a-hole? Just so I can get that positive feedback. Because, by the way, meaningless subreddit. You usually know if you're the a-hole. And it's like, what am I going to do? Be reminded that I'm in the wrong because it's 2 weeks later and I shouldn't have waited, you know? Um, really, I guess the lesson is, as in, I've said to myself before, if you want to go see a movie, go see it as soon as you can, whenever you can, with whoever you can. And for this one, I waited. I didn't get to see it right away, and then I wanted to see it with somebody else, but couldn't, and then I saw it with somebody else in a compromise viewing. So the presentation of the movie, like the sound and picture, were still good, and the movie was still decent, but it wasn't, as impactful as seeing Civil War on its first Tuesday, and that was the last movie I saw. Well, I keep forgetting the Fall Guy. So I've seen 5 movies this year. It's June now, so it's 6 months. I've seen 5 movies this year. One movie came out last year that was Poor Things, saw in January, and then I saw Dune Part 2 in March, and then I saw Civil War late April, and I saw The Fall Guy beginning of May, and then Furiosa. And then nothing in June appeals to me, and this is why the breakup of the this season being the season finale made sense to me, because not really anything in June interests me. Inside Out 2 is like the big movie, and I didn't like Inside Out 1. Part of it, and you can read my review, is that like it was a horrible experience watching it. But I'm wondering if in the future, am I going to just go big and go like opening night, let's go. Let's go see a movie when it's in its prime, because like the other movies coming out, Bike Riders, I can wait for that on video. The Exorcism, that was delayed for years. Kinds of Kindness, interesting, but it's also an anthology movie. Maybe I'll see it at second run. It's supposed to be all right, but it's definitely one I can wait for. A Quiet Place Day One is something that would look cool, but it just looks so generic. Like anybody could have done this movie, which is disappointing. And again, it looks like CGI fest. Never hugely been into Despicable Me. I tried to watch it with my nephew, and my nephew just wasn't having watching Despicable Me 3. It's kind of like in between our generations. Um, and then um, there is Maxine, which I might go see that because I liked X and I liked Pearl, so I might go see this one. But that's one I can wait for, and then then we're getting into like this is mid-July, so this is more than a month from now, and there isn't really a movie. It's the thick of summer, and there's no like the big movie is a kids movie of Despicable Me 4. That's the big movie. Like Long Legs is the one that I will go see, and I suspect that many people will. It's just I didn't like the director's last movie, but this looks good. So I might go see it, and when I go see it, I think I'll pay opening night for it because I don't care too much to see Deadpool, because Deadpool 2 wasn't great. I enjoyed Deadpool 1 a lot, but Deadpool 2 was just okay. I actually did a podcast on it. I wonder if it's on here. It was one of the first podcasts I did with Nick Kottman. And I might have put it on my YouTube page before it got deleted, and that's why. Um, but yeah, uh, going back, I'd have to go back to, man, that was like 2018 or something like that. So yeah, it was before I started being on Spotify. So yeah, Long Legs will be the one where I'm like, okay, I'll go see it, hope it's good, and I'll go opening night for that. I think. And then there's Twisters, really, really into that. So that's like mid-July. So, like I'm going to wait 5 weeks to go see a movie. And then I'll go see Long Legs and Twisters back to back. And then in August, it's like, if it's cheap, I might go see Borderlands. It depends on if I've beaten the second game by then. And even then, it's like, Uncharted meant a lot to me. So that's why I went to see the movie, even though I figured it wasn't going to be great. And it was fine. And then the M. Night Shyamalan movie, like, I've grown up mostly seeing his movies, like, on home video, like, with the family. That's how most people watch his movies. Though I saw Split in theaters, and I think that is the only M. Night Shyamalan movie I've seen in theaters, if I'm not mistaken. It was kind of too, I wouldn't say too scary, but I was like a shade too young, even though I wanted to see um, the Village in theaters. I didn't end up seeing it. So yeah, it's kind of funny to think because he's like an inspirational director, but yeah, Split is the only um, movie that I've seen in theaters with M. Night Shyamalan, even though Signs was just on TV the other day. And it's like, that was, my dad just said, like, that was a good movie. And it is. So yeah. Um, I hope Trap is good, but it stars Josh Hartnett, and I don't think Josh Hartnett is a great actor. I know people are nostalgic for him now. I don't care for him. Like, yeah, he made movies during the 2000s. A lot of people did. And yeah, he looks the same. Whoop-de-doo. He's never disappeared into a role, and he's also never um, had a whole lot of charisma. So, like, people, I guess people on Twitter who just get excited and podcasts over Josh Hartnett, they're like, yeah, reminds me of when I was younger. So I want to support him. And it's funny how, like, that has basically fueled his comeback. Like, he was in a Black Mirror episode last year. He was in Oppenheimer, of course. He was in a movie that was delayed, Operation Fortune, Ruse de Guerre. That's the Guy Ritchie movie. As just, the goofy actor in the center of, like, spy games and stuff like that. So he's kind of had a mini comeback, I guess. So I don't know if he fired his agent or got a better one, but yeah, good for him. And then, of course, Alien Romulus. That's the one that I'll end up seeing, um, for sure. Saw the last two Alien movies in theaters. I really enjoy the Alien franchise. So that's, let's say, three more movies for the year that I'm gonna see. Do not care for Beetlejuice. Um, and then Never Let Go. Like, I like Alexander Aja, but like, unless this gets like supreme reviews, and if we're going by the movie Crawl, which got good reviews, but like not great reviews, I need like a crocodile in hunting somebody in a house in a hurricane isn't as is more exciting than a house where there's like a giant snake out in the forest or something like Anaconda or whatever. So it has to do better than 84%, like, and 75 score. This has to be like a 90% movie on Rotten Tomatoes in order for me to get onto it. So unlikely there. Like, maybe if I have my nephew, maybe I'll take him to see The Wild Robot, because I think that actually legitimately looks good. Um, it's from the director of How to Train Your Dragon, so. And then, we're getting into October. So again, there's only like 1, 2, 3 movies so far that I've nailed down. Um, Now we're still before the halfway point. It's usually in August that like all of the Academy Award movies come out, and then the big December movies come out. So there haven't been the rest of the trailers for the rest of the year. I can skip over the Dwayne Johnson Christmas movie, Red One, because that's gonna be garbage. Like that Gladiator 2 is gonna be like I think they might have something. I've heard they've used live animals, and I've mentioned the budget of that movie got out of control. It's like $300 million that they've spent on that movie, and they use like live sharks or something insane like that, and chimpanzees. So that might be cool. You have the Forrest Gump reunion with the director Tom Hanks and um, who played Jenna, Robin Wright. So that could be interesting. But Sony is like a crapshoot. Every once in a while, they come out with something. I would be interested in Wicked, but it's just like Color Purple, where it's kind of like, I can wait. Moana 2, I can wait. You know? So, like, what's going to be the big December movie this year? Because there's not a Star Wars, there's not like a DC movie, um, there's not a Marvel movie. So you have Lord of the Rings, The War of Rohirrim, don't care. Craven the Hunter, I love the director. He directed Margin Call. And I also like Triple Frontier. I saw All Is Lost and Most Violent Year in theaters, but like visually it looks ugly. So I don't care for it. Like the big movies being Mufasa, Sonic the Hedgehog, like it's good to be a kid, I guess. Nosferatu remake starring Lily Rose Depp and Aaron Taylor Johnson and Bill Skarsgård and Nicholas Hoult. Basically, all people, aside from Willem Dafoe, is also in it. All people who the internet seems to think, because they are white and have been around for a while, that they're great. Um, there's your cast. You know, I'm trying to think of what Robert Eggers' first movie was. Oh, yeah, it was The Witch. And this guy has not cast a black person in his movie. And the reason I mention that is because I don't like his movies and I want to find something that's wrong with him. But I think that's kind of a winner there because he directs like really white movies, like really white movies. And like people think, oh, cinema, because he's big on like production value. He has beautiful sets for like, The Lighthouse and The Northman, um, and The Witch. Um, but he's a white New Yorker, and it's so. I'll call it out now. Yes, I'm being hypocritical. I'm being a hypocritical, as they would say, liberal person. Even though I'm more of an NDP person, there's my political views for those who are dying to know. But like, yeah, I don't like this guy's movies. Um, the fact is, like, and Christopher Nolan proved this, like, you can cast a bunch of white people in a movie and John David Washington, and, like, it won't necessarily affect the quality of your movie. Um, but, like, my frame of reference is just, like, if you're going to tell a story and you're going to have, like, white people in it, white people have been in movies for, like, 100 years. And like when you make a movie, you're competing against every story that has ever been told, essentially, um, represented by your characters. So you better be better than what you're going after. You know, like, oh, you're making a bank robbery movie. Oh well, you better be better than Heat. You know, Den of Thieves, by the way, was kind of dope because it like lowers the rent of it a bit more. It's like this is like not even a down and like Heat is the high class version, and Den of Thieves is the low rent scummy version. So I think that works like really well. Like there's a different angle to it. But these new filmmakers who seem very elite, um, I don't want to say snobby because like Robert Eggers uses a lot of folkloric and mythological elements to his films. So that's not like, high class or anything he's working within genre, but it's like people get attached to his formalism of like, oh, he made the lighthouse with equipment from over 100 years ago, or, whatever the gimmick is. It's like, yeah, he makes critically acclaimed movies that are basically like what people complain PlayStation games are. It's like, oh, you look at it, looks pretty, you go through it once, have no interest in seeing it again. And yeah, he makes movies that lose money. Um, you know, he'll make a movie, nobody will go see it, and a bunch of people on Twitter will complain that people aren't going to see a movie they have no interest in seeing. And him, Ari Aster a bit, although, with that, we knew that it was not going to be a great movie. Like, those are two actors who are like that. People throw Jordan Peele in there, but the fact is Jordan Peele like gets it. He's like, here is what spectacle is. Nope is an event movie. Us was an event movie. Get Out was the event movie. And granted, even if he never makes anything as good as those again, I do like how he's trying to make an original movie every time. He's kind of an heir to M. Night Shyamalan in that way. Um, because M. Night Shyamalan did Sixth Sense, and then he did Unbreakable, and then he did Signs. So M. Night Shyamalan, yeah, better, but yeah, I look forward to Jordan Peele's next movie. So, moving on from the movie stuff, because I've said most of what I need to say about Furiosa. I was late, traffic delayed me, I didn't have my phone, I come in, I missed the first part of the movie. People are on their phones. The buddy I'm with is on my phone. And then I tell the person to be quiet. They tell me to very politely F off. The movie theater war is over. So, moving on to my next thing, which is today was sort of E3. Xbox had their E3 presentation, basically. And we're Summer Games Fest, which was yesterday. So, E3 Electronic Entertainment Expo was a convention that happened where the video game industry would get together and meet and reveal their big news. And traditional media outlets that games have forever wanted their attention from, like ABC, CBS, NBC, would all come and report on it. And it's the one time of the year where regular folks who weren't into video games would know about something. Now, of course, video games, with generations getting older and stuff, the people who've grown up with video games are significantly older now. So, most people know what video games are. So there's been less need for E3. As a result, E3 basically fell apart, and the video game publishers, most of which are now owned by Microsoft, realized we can just host our own thing, put it up on YouTube, everybody will watch. And I am disappointed. Why am I disappointed? Well, I just don't like Xbox anymore. They had this was their big day today. And what did they announce hardware-wise? That they're coming out with a new Xbox Series X in Galaxy Black. And that basically looks from far away the exact same as their previous Xbox Series X. It just has some, white dots on it to speckles like stars. And it's 2 terabytes, which means it will be more expensive than the existing one. So there's no price cut for the disc Xbox One. And in fact, I will go so as far to predict that basically the standard 1 terabyte Xbox One will fall out of favor. They'll sell through all of those. And then, as a result, the existing disc Xbox One will be more expensive and harder to come by. But of course, they have to trumpet this BS, which nobody buys, except maybe themselves, that they're all into game preservation, which is why they came out with an all-digital Series X, which is the exact same, except that it doesn't have a disk drive. So you can't play it on disc. Yeah, and it's white. So that's cool. Yeah. It says here, I'm reading from Yahoo Entertainment, their refreshed console lineup. So the digital version still comes with 1 terabyte of storage and will cost $450, so $500 less. The have the all white digital model which will be 2 terabytes. So yeah, the 2 terabyte model, basically they have it costs standard $500. This is US prices because Canadian inflation is so high. So it's like $650 in Canada. But anyways, standard is $500. They're introducing a $600 model at 2 terabytes, so double the storage. What they're going to do is they're going to introduce the 2 terabyte model at 600, and then they're just probably not going to produce any more 1 terabyte models. So it will stay at 600. And then with inflation, it will be like, what, 750? Doesn't matter. Nobody's buying it anyway. They say the Xbox Series S is getting a more modest update. They had a 1 terabyte model in carbon black last year, and a version with the same storage in the original 256. Now it says the 1 terabyte robot white option, aka the standard option, which I bought for my oldest brother, will be offered and cost $350. Company notes that the black model will be available while supplies last, indicating that it's phasing the variant out. So what does this mean? They're just basically putting a space between models, and like they had white, black, white. So it's the exact same as the black model. It's just in white. So there's like no difference. So when you look at cards on the table, what Microsoft has done with their hardware lineup is they've introduced a 2 terabyte model. And they're going to get rid of the 1 terabyte model, so the price is going up. And then they've upped the memory of the digital model, which they hope to sell more of, and they have, because it's significantly cheaper. I maintain that the Xbox Series S is a necessity, and of course my brother uses it now as his like main entertainment media hub. But yeah, it's not great what they're doing, and I just find it so insidious, this company, that we basically, whatever we do, we have to tolerate their crap. But you know, some interesting things in the space that they're doing. I have in my hands right now a game called System Shock. It is a remake of a game from 1994. It was remade by Night Dive Studios, and it had a limited run. And what I did was I tweeted at my local library, Kingston Front Public Library, along with Night Dive Studios on Twitter, saying, I cannot wait to play this on my Xbox One, or, PS4 and Xbox One. Of course, they order the next gen versions, but the cool thing about Xbox that they're doing now is that if you have an Xbox One, like myself, you can buy an Xbox Series game and it'll play on the same disc. Why? Because most games are just a license for you to download the actual version. But very impressively, I got this from the library thinking that, okay, well, it will take me to the thing and I'll take half a day to download. I turn on System Shock and the game works right away. There's nothing to download. It has been so long since I've gotten a game and can just jump right in, you know? And that's the problem with gaming now, is that there are so many barriers. A lot of them self-imposed, but a lot of them not. And it's just so bad that it's like alien to me that like a game would be on the disc. What? Wow, crazy. So yeah, I've yet to start that because I had this pod on the docket that I was thinking of, and I'm gonna get into it. It's just I want to get that set up right that I've been working towards so much, and the problem is that I have to have like multiple laptops plugged in to play it, and I'm just kind of like, okay, at what point do I give up the ghost? You know, like my other brother says, why would I create work for my games? Just play the game, just have fun and play the game. But me and my setup right now, I'm just kind of like, well, if I'm not recording, then I'm losing value because it's not being recorded, it's not being preserved. And, you know, I know in my heart of hearts that it doesn't matter, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't try, right? So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should take a look at how my YouTube is doing actually for my channel and see if that like 2 seconds that I recorded does anything. Well, it didn't upload in the first place, so that's fine though. Maybe it disconnected or something. But yeah, if you get an Xbox game at retail now, it'll come with an Xbox Series copy and an Xbox One copy. And this is a limited run game that mostly appeared digitally. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm gonna share that. I think on Reddit and just see what the reactions are, and see what people say. Because it's like I live so much of my life on social media now. It's all for show. It's like, hey, look at this game I got, and then it's like, meanwhile, I never play it. But I only have it for a limited number of weeks. The previous game I rented on Xbox was Stray, and I rented it twice, didn't touch it once. Why do I do this to myself? Because I think like, oh, it's just easier to watch stuff, and I've I might as well say this at the finale now. I struggle to play games now. I catch myself up on it. It's like, as I said, I'm like, oh, I should be recording, and I've like sucked the fun out of it for myself. So it's not as fun. And I sort of feel bad about that, but I'm just kind of like, well, it's just how it is. It's just easier to do something like that, where I can browse social media and have fun and have laughs, and it's way easier and way more variety and way more accessible than learning to play a game. Now, System Shock inspired Bioshock, and it's a very apparently complex game. You can't like leave it and come back to it and pick it up, and it doesn't tell you where to go. So it is a significant challenge. So will it engage me? Will I even start it? Well, you'll have to tune in to season 4 to find out. So let me say what Xbox did beyond the hardware. They came out with a couple of things. They announced of their big franchises, Gears of War, E-Day, Emergence Day. Gears of War 1 takes place 2 weeks after Emergence Day. That's when the locusts come out of the ground and start battling. So it's actually doesn't seem like it's not a significant amount of time earlier. If I go to the synopsis, I want to find if they say 2 weeks after E-Day. Oh, it's 14 years. I always thought it was 2 weeks. Oh well. Well, I didn't like die on that hill. Anyways, I like Gears of War. It's just like a nice casual pick up and play kind of video game series. What annoys me is this: Microsoft can't count. I knew that they weren't gonna, in my heart of hearts, that they weren't gonna announce Gears of War 6. Gears 5, as it was called, ended on a cliffhanger. And somewhere along the lines, they realized it lost popularity, and now they're like, we got to bring in the homies. We got to bring in the core audience again. And we're not going to do that by doing the 6th installment or something. So we're going to do a prequel, and we're going to make Gears great again. That's the aim. What annoys me is that like they leave something on a cliffhanger, and then game development takes 4 years, and the next game is a prequel. So it's like, okay, when am I going to get Gears 6? 2030? Maybe. Like, this was announced with a CGI trailer, so it's probably not coming out until, you know, it's not coming out until 2026, maybe. So that's frustrating to me. It doesn't actually have a, it doesn't have a release date. So, I mean, cool. And then they announced Perfect Dark. That's, cool. I've always wanted to play Perfect Dark. I never played it on N64. I played it briefly, like the multiplayer. And Perfect Dark Zero, which came out on Xbox 360 at launch. It got terrible reviews, so I never played it. Yeah. I'm looking forward to this one. It looks a bit too much like Deus Ex. It's like, well, I've played that, and of course they're just calling it Perfect Dark. It's the third movie because again, the third video game Microsoft can't count. But whatever. Looking forward to it. Fable. I had some fun briefly playing the first Fable game. It's apparently like a very short game. I should actually pick it up and play it if I ever, if my streaming, if I build up enough followers for playing on YouTube and TikTok. I'll do that. And again, I have like 2,000. I keep forgetting I have like 2,700 followers on TikTok, and when I put out content on YouTube, I get subscribers every day for like a week, so I can build this. It's still possible. It's never too late to start. So we'll see where I'll do a count of all my social media at the beginning of season 4 of this podcast. I'll tell myself now. But yeah, that's what Microsoft has that I'm interested in. They also have a bunch of other stuff. They announced like State of Decay 3. They announced something that looked like a Dead Space ripoff, and it turned out it was the DLC for Starfield, the new Bethesda game. They have Doom, The Dark Ages, which should be fun. I played Doom on PS4. I played Doom Eternal briefly at the beginning, the very beginning of the pandemic, before my Xbox Game Pass relapsed, and it was a bit hard, so I left it. I kind of want to finish it though, but I have so much on my plate. Like I said, I have system shock. I don't even know if I'm gonna start it. I hope I do, but you know, I just got to get oriented. I mean, part of it too, and I was thinking about this, is I'm sitting now looking at my 32-inch TV in my own room, which has all my consoles lined up and all my recording equipment, and I would much rather play on my dad's 65-inch, which he's on watching TV all the time, but I would rather share that screen than play on this one. It's just way more immersive, playing on a big screen, and way funner. So yeah, maybe I'll just do that. Maybe I'll just take the 2 seconds, bring that out there, um, hit record, and then maybe I'll uh, record my face on TikTok or something, and that's how I'll do it. We'll see. Um, it's just you need such complicated setups. Streaming is the most complicated thing. Um, why is it so complicated for me though? Yeah, what else did they announce? Going through, I mean, they have an Indiana Jones game coming out, and the preview that they played was so boring. It's weird because the character is still modeled after Harrison Ford, and Troy Baker, who I believe is voicing the main guy, sounds kind of like Harrison Ford, but not quite. The graphics aren't the greatest, and then the gameplay they showed was just a lot of talking, and I'm like, I'm over this. Like, the problem I have with Microsoft Showcase is that with Nintendo, anytime they show a game, it's about the gameplay. Like, here's the gameplay hook. Here's why this is going to be fun. Then Xbox is like, you'll care about this because this is the brand. Like, perfect example is they let the makers of Halo walk away and they bought the franchise, and they let the makers of Gears of War walk away and they bought the franchise, and both are less popular than when the original franchise makers were there. But the IP is more worth it to them because that's just how they think. They're like, well, we can hire the best people to do a thing. It doesn't matter. Like, it's reproducible. It's not. And then you have Sony, who owns the people who made Halo. And now apparently they've had some problems with Destiny 2 not taking off, but it shows that they smartly value talent. And the way Sony has grown PlayStation internally has been rather impressive. How they like come out of the gate, kind of nail it with the PlayStation, nail it with the PlayStation 2. They struggle with the PlayStation 3. They get a little cocky, but they make it up at the end. And then they coast a bit, it feels like, on PlayStation 4 and kind of cash in their chips. And then on PlayStation 5, it's like Microsoft is totally belly flopped by this point that like it's PlayStations in a walk. They've sold to like the same amount of PlayStation 5s as they have 4s by the same point. So it feels like gaming is in a bit of a rut. But yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to what Nintendo comes up with. Because, Xbox is, they revealed Black Ops 6 and any semblance of like cultural relevance in terms of plot goes out the window because now it's like in the 90s, which makes sense for Black Ops because they haven't really explored that era. They said it follows the flashbacks of Black Ops 2. I don't remember. I played Black Ops 2 when I was in university. That was now over 7 years ago. It was actually closer to 11 years ago when I played Black Ops 2 on PlayStation 3. So I'm not going to remember that. But nonetheless, it's Black Ops 6. That's cool. I would have loved like modern Black Ops. Not Modern Warfare, but like modern Black Ops. Takes place in real countries. Make that game, you cowards. Meanwhile, I'm still waiting on 6 Days in Fallujah, which is in early access. Um, Looks cool, and it's about like the um, Iraq War. Um, that's a cool game. When's that coming out? Um, it came out last year in early access, but um, it says, oh, this is a weird way to end. It says, as of now, it seems to be available on Xbox One, and it doesn't have a capital O on it, so that's odd. PlayStation and Xbox versions are confirmed for future. Yeah, yeah. Um, but it's released in early access. Um, yeah. Anyway, this is a game. This is a game about the Iraq War. That's a first-person shooter. Um, there isn't much on it, but you can watch gameplay of it. And again, it's available in while it's being developed on Steam early access. So you can check that out. What else does Xbox Game Studios have going on? So their Xbox Games Showcase. They have Stalker 2, which I'm looking forward to. That's made by Ukrainian developer CSG Game World. Really looking forward to that. Their sister studio made the Metro games, which were fun. So yeah, I'm into that game. Um, uh, what else have they got going on? Okay, is this gonna show? I love how they have like 3 different events: Xbox Game Showcase, Xbox Developer Direct, Xbox Partner Preview, and it's like they all mean the same thing. I mean, they introduced some other stuff, another Dragon Age, don't care. South of Midnight, which apparently is stop motion on purpose, because gamers love playing games at 12 frames per second. Like, why they bought Compulsion Games after they made We Happy Few, which took forever to develop, came out in early access, got terrible reviews. Uh, like, who at Microsoft thought it would be a good idea to buy them? Maybe they just got a good deal. Um, yeah, and are very cheap. Maybe they're only like 12 people. Anyway, and then, some DLC for Sea of Thieves, Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. Indiana Jones, I mentioned. Avowed, that's like their latest RPG, don't really care. And then, you have Assassin's Creed and stuff. But people seem to think that this was like some kind of like knockout, and I just don't think of that really at all. They had like a Fallout 76, like they brought out all their stuff, but like people were thinking, oh, it'd be cool if they had a handheld. Wasn't announced. It'd be cool if they had a price cut. Wasn't announced. If making things that would make gaming more accessible or affordable, no. I mean, they'll still talk a big game about game preservation while releasing not one but 2 discless consoles. Even though they have the technology to really push gaming forward, the only thing that they've really done is make a cheaper console that like is sort of cool but also doesn't, like, why can't I get an add-on disk drive for that? It's USB 3.1. Of course it would work. But it's just, Microsoft being Microsoft. They're the most powerful company in the world. They are a multi-trillion-dollar company. Of course they're money grubbers. Not much I can do about that. I mean, is so I mean, Summer Games Fest, I wasn't paying too much attention to. I was just exhausted getting back from Ottawa, and I like slept through it. And I even slept through the blog that I listened to, um, or the podcast I listened to that I like. Um, so like the major stuff that was revealed, um, for Summer Games Fest, like if I go to IGN now, is anything really gonna come up, um, that hasn't been talked about? And I kind of like I see nothing, and it's disappointing to me because it's like all this stuff that was revealed at the Xbox Game Showcase. It's just I've played it all before. Played it all before. I see a game, I know how to play that. I'm not interested. I want new experiences, and I want cheaper games. And both those things are very possible. It's just they're not being shown to me. So I might have to, I might just get a Switch too. I'll keep my PlayStation 4. I'll keep my Xbox One because again, with games like System Shock and like they did a discussion, uh some consultant firm working for uh Sony, or Sony with their own internal numbers revealed this, that we are 4 years into the console generation. So this time for PlayStation 4, it was like 2017. Um, so Uncharted 4 had already come out by this time in the PlayStation 4's life cycle. In the PlayStation 3's life cycle, um, Uncharted 2 had already come out and a bunch of other stuff. Um, and, you know, the PlayStation 2's life cycle, which isn't like really like that life cycle was over. That was when, same with PlayStation 1, when game cycles only lasted 4 years. And it did for the Wii U, but the Wii U bombed. And there were also some talks of like, oh, they're going to come out with a professional console or whatever. This generation is a wash. They're going to come out with AI. That hasn't happened yet. But it's just, where are the new gameplay ideas? Because I'm seeing, you know, Gears 6, Halo 6, Forza 8, although they're not calling that because they're allergic to numbering things. And I just want new experiences. And VR is still too expensive. So we'll have to wait and see. So, technical issues. Didn't really have any. Again, in Ottawa, I had my laptop with me, I had my phones with me, and despite having access to Cyberpunk on my laptop and uh, games on the go with Netflix and a controller and the controller holder with the phone attached to the Xbox controller, all that, I just didn't feel I had time to play games. And the problem is that both of the machines, my laptop, which I used, and my phone, which I used, are not dedicated machines. That, like, the reason Microsoft talks about, oh, we're competing with phones, we're competing with Netflix, we're competing with all this. The reason they are competing with this is because they're a media machine. Like, my Xbox One is a media machine. I'll go on it, and I'm more likely right now to watch The Bear than play System Shock. And it's something I have to drop. And what the Nintendo Switch got it right. Like, I've thought about getting a Nintendo Switch, like, and it would only cost me $130. And if I, you know, even if I barely played or whatever, the thing is, when I decide to play a Nintendo Switch, I pick up and I play. Like, you turn it on, it's there. And I'm talking the Nintendo Switch Lite that's just like a handheld. Um, you know, they're missing the point. You're not competing with TikTok and all that. It's a different experience. The reason I didn't play Cyberpunk on my laptop is because it wasn't easy to do, even though I could do it. The reason I didn't play any games on my phone is because it wasn't easy to do. If I have a dedicated device where I can just hit on and I'm there, that's easy. That's accessible. That's the lesson Xbox should be learning. That's why they should have released a dedicated handheld. Um, Imagine if there's a device where you could turn on and it was a handheld device, and it played console level graphics, or you could plug it into something that does that, and you could also stream that to like Twitch and YouTube and TikTok, and you had all these integrations, and you could also take it with you or turn all those off, and it cost like $300 and had you know a 6 to 8 hour battery life. That'd be like, I feel that would work. If it costs $2.99 Canadian, you can stream your games, um, and it can record your voice, and you can turn on the camera even if you want, and you can play, you know, let's say 480p 60. That's not, and then you can plug it in, and you can play 1080 60 to the home console option. That'd be cool to me. That'd be worth it. So why isn't Microsoft doing that? We know that they're like researching a handheld, but they don't release it. They don't like to win. What can I say? So I mean, the technical issues I had this week were just accessibility for games is one I've been struggling with. I mean, the fact is that I was able to tweet at the developer, tag my local library, and my local library purchased a copy because it's a limited run game of this game, System Shock. I was able to go to my local library and pick up a new game that costs like $90 and take it home with me. And there are so many distractions that like I kind of have no desire to play it. Like, it's weird to me that like I'm starting it up and then I'm thinking about like streaming the game. And it's like I need to learn to get back into having fun with games again. And I can't really do that because I always feel like I'm missing out. Like, if I play a game, I'm like, oh, I should be streaming this on Twitch. And I stream it on Twitch, and then I'm like, well, I should be. YouTube is my growth platform. That's where I should be putting it. So, I hit record on YouTube. But then I pause it for a second, and then I'm like, well, this ruins it for YouTube. And then I'm like, well, I'm growing on TikTok. Why don't I, do that? And really what I should be doing, now that I'm thinking about it, and I've thought about it so much, is I play on Xbox. I don't record to Twitch. Or maybe I do when I'm playing multiplayer. I stick with that option. And then I get to a clip that I like. I can record the last 5 minutes, and then I can share that to OneDrive, and then I can share that to TikTok or whatever if I really want. It's a lot of steps, but I can do it. Okay, that's what I do. And then externally, I record through YouTube. And with those clips, I can put that stuff to TikTok if I want, and all that. I think that covers my bases for Xbox. And then for PlayStation, we know that they just stream directly to that. But YouTube did this weird thing where they gave me some sort of warning. I've never had this before, and they're like, oh, your channel verification is like revoked. We know it's some suspicious activity. So it's like the 8 hour Horizon gameplay thing, or it's just 2 hours. Sorry, not 8. But it's like cut down to 15 minutes now, or maybe it wasn't before. I don't know, but it was like I was demoted, and it's just a reminder of like social media tech companies have you by the balls and can just like cut off your progress at any given time. It's like we need to unionize or something because we're just screwed so regularly. You know, it's a worthy question to ask whether something should be unionized or not. I think if employees are getting screwed, and an employee, producing work is being taken advantage of, if that's the case, like SAG has a union because the actors can get taken advantage of. It's like, oh, you're working this now, you're working this. Oh, we changed the script to do this. Oh, you're doing this. You didn't agree to this, but we're doing it, Or I mentioned this to my mom when I worked at Staples, where it was like every one summer they hired me once every 2 weeks from 12 to 4:30, including like a half-hour break. So I got one 4-hour shift every 2 weeks. And like there was no reason for that. It's just I could have made money that summer and I didn't get to make any money. So I got screwed over for hours because like that was the minimum. You know, that's not necessarily something that it's like we would need a union to get involved with, but it's just an example of a company or manager being shitty. Another thing that that manager did was that they would, they weren't good at managing. So and I'm not talking about my big time manager, I'm talking about the fill in manager, by the way. And like, it's like, oh, so and so is not working. Oh, so and so is not coming in So all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're working until 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And then you're coming in, you have to be in at 7 the next day. So you're finishing at 9, getting home at 9:30, getting up at 6:30. So the time from, let's say, 9:30, from the moment you go in the door, maybe you shower and get ready for bed. If you go quick enough, you can finish at 10. Then you get 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours of sleep exactly. And then you get up, get ready, breakfast, then go into work and stuff. And so there's no time for playtime. You're just like straight from there to work. That's another thing where it's just kind of like, they're crushing you a bit. Is there like they don't have to manage well, because they can depend on you. And that's like another thing where it's kind of like this company made a lot of money from its customers. Like, if you ever go down to like a grocery store and it's like, oh, would you like to donate to a local charity? Yeah, sure. You donate to the charity, they get the check, they get the tax write off. You get nothing. They get a giant tax write off. And then they're like, look how much we raised for charity. It's like, yeah, because you haggled me when I was ready to pay for something and made it so I press a button. I find that really cheap. And that's what these corporations do. It's like they look for anywhere to make money. Hey, that's what they're supposed to do. But it's just kind of I feel like it's rubbing our faces in it a bit. Because it's like they're a multi-million-dollar company. Maybe in some cases $1 billion company. They have a lot of employees that they treat this way. And then, you know, who gets the extra money? The executives who like move some stuff around on a form. I wouldn't mind it if it went into the stores locally, but all of a sudden when it comes to like improving the customer experience, it's like, oh, we don't have the money for that. You know, we'll put it on you and we'll have you do a lot of training and we'll scold you. But like, if we're actually want to make customers, have a good experience, like have enough cashiers on deck, have enough people that can, get to somebody and have their query. If we can have people study, if we can have people like actually be able to demonstrate something like for real, not like fake demo where it's like, oh, the internet doesn't actually, oh, you actually have to sign up for an account. Oh, it's, it looks like this, it doesn't actually work, but if you get it for real, it'll be like this. Like, no, like these are things that they could legitimately invest in the customer experience, but all that money isn't going towards the customer experience now. It's going towards the pockets of the C-suite. And, there are times when the C-suite do come up, like they're the ones who come up with the sweeping changes in identity of these companies. And a lot of times they do turn it around. I'm voting on BlackBerry shares this month and they haven't turned it around. So, I'm going to do a cursory no vote for the executive. And to be fair, I haven't done my research yet because I do annual research. I have shares in BlackBerry. And so I like to see how the CEO is doing and stuff. But it's like, oh, we changed how executives get compensated. Meanwhile, we're trading at $2.68 US. It's like, well, no, you shouldn't be, like, your stock is tanking. Why am I voting for a seat? Like, people who prize stability in, like, when you're below second place, or like you're in 18th place, and you're like, oh, well, our stock will eventually come around. It's like, no, we're worse off than we were a year ago. Why am I okaying this? This is terrible. Throw it, like, rip it out at the root and start over. Like, I used to work for this guy, Henry, and, like, I thought I was doing a decent enough job sometimes, and he'd come in and he's like, no, you can't sit down, like, lie down and pull weeds in the garden. You have to stand up because you can pull faster and work faster like that. I'm trying to help you, and I want my lawn to look nice. I'm like, but it's like, I knew it was right. You got to do the hard work. And, like, executives a lot of the time in these companies are kind of, they praise stability and double down on growth, but, like, it's exponential growth on paper. It's not actual growth. Like, it's growth on a balance sheet, but it's not growth in the company. Like, the company isn't expanding. It's not getting into new territory. It's just making money on money. And that's where the extra bonuses of executives and CEOs irritate me, because it's like, I am doing my thing at the bottom level so that somebody gets paid more. And what's the point of them getting paid more? How are they bettering society? They're not. They're just making more money. Maybe they can get a renovation on their house. That doesn't benefit me. That doesn't benefit the customer. So that's why I don't like that stuff. That's how I feel. So yeah, maybe I'll come back. Maybe my season 4 will be letting you know what what that's like, and I'll be doing long legs. I kind of don't at the same time want to take more than a week break off. And again, I want my brother to actually come in and make a comment. He said he might do, a voice memo or something, because it was originally, oh, we're going to do a video and we're going to record it, and then the time comes along, it's like too much work. And let's just keep it simple, keep it audio, do this thing. Meanwhile, I'm still recording our episode from TIFF 2 years ago, because we do not talk about the Fablemans in our review of the Fablemans. It's kind of funny like that. So, hope to hear from you, Sam. But, yeah, you got to talk about brass tacks, or else it's difficult. But, people dawdle. It's like how it is. What am I at here? Like, past the 2 hour mark? I am at 2:42. And, yeah, it's technical issues that I'm sorting out. I feel every day like I'm closer to sorting it out. And next week you'll see if I've made any progress. I'll tell you this, on the social media fight front, I have made progress. That Dave Lee, who I was fighting with, he had a child, and if you have your child, no matter what, kind of like nothing phases you, I guess. So he posted his sound card of having a child, and I thought about, like, making a joke of, like, Steve Buscemi might be damaged, but that kid is coming into the world brand new, or something like that, which is not really a funny joke, because the delivery, wind up, all that needs work. But I just said simply, wasn't even sarcastic. I'm like, congratulations, cursory congratulations, decency, and he said, thank you. We buried the hatchet, folks. We buried the hatchet. So, I'm not a confrontational person. I like burying the hatchet with people. Sometimes I do it too readily, and that's what annoys me about myself, of, like, somebody's kind of an asshole, and I don't want to deal with it, so I let them off the hook, and I kind of make a joke about something, and in my head I'm like, well, this guy doesn't really deserve it, and I'm hoping that he does the cursory amount of, like, yeah, well, at least this, and sometimes they do, and then sometimes they, like, don't, and I'm just like, wow, this guy doesn't even deserve goodwill headed his way, So, it was a couple weeks ago and somebody said something bad on Twitter and people were like, oh, you're very mean. And then some person's like, you know what? No, we need to bring back lockers to shove people into because people need to be spoken to that way because people will just walk on over unless they're put in their place. And that's what needs to happen. So here's to next season where I will put people in their place more often. But when decency can be afforded, I will afford it. So take care, and thanks for listening this season. We'll be back for season 4, episode 1 of the Film Gamer podcast.